One day at the airport, on my way back from work, I ran into an old classmate. It was Donald, a guy who had made my life miserable from middle school through high school. Because of Donald, I was pushed to the point of dropping out of high school. His personality hadn't changed even as an adult. Upon seeing me, he immediately demeaned me as the dropout loser. I almost lost it at that moment, but I managed to control my anger and walked away. Later, Donald and I would run into each other again at the airport. "Hey, dropout, this is what an airplane looks like," he said with a malicious smile. When it was revealed that I was the captain, his reaction made me surprised. My name is Brian, a 38-year-old bachelor. Saying I'm a pilot might make it sound like I followed a path of elite success, but in reality, I dropped out of high school once. I had been subjected to insidious bullying from middle to high school. The start of it all was a fallout with a classmate, Donald. Donald was outgoing, friendly, and popular with everyone. In contrast, my only merit was being serious, and while I did okay in studies, I was bad at socializing. So when Donald, who had been on the same soccer team in elementary and joined the soccer club with me, approached me early on, I was overjoyed. The initial connection was our shared history with soccer. In our group, I was always the butt of the jokes. My inability to deflect the teasing only served as more fodder for Donald's charm and, simultaneously, his cruelty. Initially, I preferred being teased over being alone, accepting my place in the group. I even found joy in making others laugh with my reactions. However, the dynamics slowly began to distort. The way laughter was garnered in the group gradually escalated. At first, I rationalized it as part of friendship dynamics. But perhaps my laughter encouraged it. The jokes gradually turned into blatant mockery and personal attacks. Sometimes, they would half-jokingly apply wrestling moves on me. "Stop it," I would say with a laugh, but no one would ever stop Donald. Instead, everyone laughed while watching us, making me realize I wasn't entertaining them, I was the entertainment. He was just enjoying humiliating me. After that realization, being part of the group became a torment. The teasing I had once brushed off laughingly became unbearable. Walking down the hallway one day, I was smacked on the head as usual. Normally, I'd just laugh it off saying, "What's that for?" But that day, "Stop it," I clearly told him. Then, "What's with you? You're not fun anymore." He made a displeased face and said, "Just because you're in the group doesn't mean you can't look like you're enjoying it." "It's impossible. I'm not having fun." "Huh. What's that supposed to mean? You were always laughing. And who do you think you are, Brian, acting all high and mighty?" he said in a low, intimidating voice, glaring at me. I glared back at him without backing down. He said, "Whatever," and walked away, quickly blending back into the group. From the next day, my life turned into hell. Arriving at school in the morning, not only Donald and the members he incited, but even unrelated classmates began to ignore me. Being ignored was still bearable, but soon they started actively harassing me. He was always the ringleader. At first, I stubbornly continued showing up at school and club activities, but eventually, the pain became too much to bear, and I started missing them. Entering the 9th grade, the stress of exams coupled with their behavior became even more vicious. Having missed nearly half of the 9th grade, my grades inevitably plummeted. I had been considered a candidate for one of the top high schools in the county back in the 8th grade, but now I found myself in a situation where I could only aim for schools 2 or 3 tiers lower. Still, I thought I could escape this situation by graduating middle school, so I tried to focus on my studies. But, as expected, I couldn't concentrate, and worst of all, I ended up going to the same high school as Donald. Up until middle school, Mr. Richard, a teacher, had taken a personal interest in helping me out, scolding Donald and the others, which made things somewhat bearable. The hell continued into high school. Trying to establish new relationships in high school, I ended up in the same class as Donald. "Hey, there's Brian," Donald declared, grabbing my collar in front of everyone as I walked into the classroom. "Let's all tease him. He loved being teased by everyone in middle school, right?" The classmates initially seemed skeptical, but once they decided I was someone they could disdain, they became endlessly cruel, characteristic of kids this age. Unlike in middle school, there was no teacher willing to protect me. Eventually, my spirit broke, and before I knew it, I couldn't bring myself to go to school anymore. Failing to meet the attendance requirements, I was held back a year, which led to me dropping out of high school. The one who tried to save me was Mr. Richard, my middle school teacher. He was the only teacher who noticed my situation and reached out to me. Not only did he scold Donald and the others, but during the exam period, he let me use his room as a refuge to escape from them. After school, I used to head to his room every day to vent my frustrations. During the 9th grade, when my attendance dropped and I fell behind in studies, he tutored me closely. Unfortunately, despite Mr. Richard's efforts, Donald and his crew's behavior never changed, but I believe he did everything he could. He was my only ally and support at school. Just having him there was like what got me through middle school. Mr. Richard, who was always concerned about me, kept in touch through letters even after graduation. But after continuing to face the same treatment in high school and losing the will to attend, I couldn't bring myself to reply to his letters. One day, he came to my house to apologize in person. "I'm really sorry, I couldn't be there for you when you needed it," he said. When Mr. Richard found out I had stopped going to high school, he brought over loads of information about correspondence high schools and night schools. "Why not start over in a new environment?" "It's useless. I'm useless." My self-esteem was damaged to the limit by being ridiculed repeatedly by Donald and the others. Mr. Richard encouraged me, saying, "Brian, you'll be fine. You'll get what you deserve if the environment changes." Driven by his passion, I began studying for the GED program through distance learning. I never really hated studying, and with the active support from my parents and Mr. Richard, my studies progressed unbelievably well. Frustrated with myself for breaking under harassment, I refused to let those guys ruin my life and immersed myself in my studies. At that time, my parents, noticing my hard work but also cautioning against overdoing it, took me on a trip for a break. That was when I first boarded an airplane. What surprised me first was the imposing presence of the aircraft before boarding. I remembered how I used to love looking at vehicles in encyclopedias as a kid, especially aircraft. Then, flying in the sky, I was completely captivated by the world above. The gradually receding view of the city, the thrill of breaking through clouds, and the clear skies beyond. The beauty seen from the airplane's window made me feel freed from everything. It was a refreshing view that seemed to erase all the entanglements and regrets over my past failures. "I want to fly freely in the sky. I want to be a pilot." This vague idea became a solid determination by the time we returned from the trip. It was the first time I had a dream, and I felt my heart leap for the first time in a while. Becoming a pilot is not an easy path. It would be a burden on my parents. But I didn't want to give up on something again. While I was struggling with these thoughts, Mr. Richard visited me again. "Look at you, Brian, you seem a lot happier." He noticed my change immediately. "How's your study going?" "It's going really well lately. I've found a goal." He looked at me encouragingly. I feared being laughed at, or being told it was impossible for me. For a moment, such thoughts crossed my mind, but then I reminded myself that Mr. Richard would never do that. And then, I gathered my courage and spoke up. "I've thought about becoming a pilot." Mr. Richard's eyes widened, tears welling up in them. Seeing his face light up with joy almost made me cry too. "That's great. I'll support you. Finding a goal is a wonderful thing. Go for it," he said with a trembling voice, taking my hand. His words solidified my resolve. After that, I talked to my parents about wanting to become a pilot. My mother, Karen, looked a bit worried, but my father, Thomas, said, "That's great. I thought you've been looking more determined lately, so this was the reason. I'll support you with all I have. Then, yes, we will. My mother nodded. Afterward, I studied hard, passed the GED program and the aviation school exams. I worked diligently on my studies and training in aviation school and finally obtained my pilot's license. But I wasn't satisfied just yet. Aiming to be a better pilot, I won a recommendation for graduate school, where I studied cutting-edge aviation. The thesis I wrote there received higher praise than I had expected, paving the way for my doctoral studies. After earning my doctorate, I finally felt a sense of accomplishment. Though I considered staying abroad for work, I decided to return home for my parents waiting in my hometown. Back home, I got a job as a pilot with an airline company. One day, while walking to the airport exit in my casual clothes, a man in dirty overalls called out to me. I recognized his face immediately and was struck speechless. It was Donald, unforgettable, who had made my middle and high school years hell. Look who it is, long time no see. The dropout loser who quit high school. What are you doing here? Guess you're a janitor or something. Got anything to say, dropout Brian? I was traumatized, forgetting where I was as my mind went blank. His tone, attitude, and expression. It brought back memories of those hellish school days. Amused by my frozen state, Donald mentioned he was working here as a mechanic. He seemed to think I was a janitor or something, his attitude clearly dismissive. There seemed to be no remorse for nearly crushing a person. You have no idea the pain you caused me. I almost lost my composure but managed to hold back my anger and simply said, "Well then, good luck," and quickly left the scene. Even after Donald was out of sight, my heart continued to beat uncomfortably for a while. Later, as the shock of that encounter began to fade, I received a call from a familiar person. It was Mr. Richard. Apparently, hearing about my achievements, Mr. Richard decided it wasn't too late to pursue his dream of graduate studies and had finally been accepted into a prestigious university in England. When I was genuinely happy for him. "There's something I'd like to ask you," he said. "I'll be flying to England, and I'd love to be on a plane piloted by you." Of course. I readily agreed, and then did everything I could to secure the pilot's seat for Mr. Richard's flight. The day of departure arrived. It was very cold, and I was walking around the aircraft for an external check, wearing a jacket over my captain's uniform. Then, I encountered Donald again. Everyone was at their posts, leaving him and me alone. Seeing me, Donald laughed and pretended to hit me with a tool. I flinched, and he said, "What, got scared? It's just a joke," with the same immaturity as before. "Hey, dropout, this is what an airplane looks like." Donald sneered openly, when a voice called from behind me. "Captain!" It was Susan, one of the cabin attendants. "Captain?" Donald looked confused, but Susan called out to me directly. "Captain, it's time for the flight. Please prepare." Understood. I'll be right there. Leaving a stunned Donald behind, I quickly made my way to Susan. Donald clicked his tongue behind me, but I felt a sense of vindication, almost like I had won something. Soon it was time to board, and the passengers began to enter the plane one by one. Seeing Mr. Richard among them made me smile involuntarily. Soon, all the passengers were seated, and the hatch was sealed. As the captain, I introduced myself and promised a safe journey through the skies to all passengers. I was sure Mr. Richard could hear my voice too. Thinking this made me feel even prouder to be piloting as a captain. Donald was a thing of the past. I can't forget the humiliation, but I'm not the same person I was back then. Reminding myself of this, I prepared to take off. The plane took off without a hitch. But then, an unexpected event occurred. A message from the control tower informed us of a sudden change in weather. Almost immediately, the plane was hit by a terrible storm. The aircraft shook violently in the blowing wind. It was an extraordinary shaking, unlike anything normal. Panic ensued inside, and amidst the chaos of reports coming through my headphones, I felt a moment of confusion. But I haven't accumulated over 10 years of experience for nothing. Plus, this situation closely resembled something I had written about in my thesis. Calm down. It's okay. I can do this after all the hard work I've put in. I collaborated with the co-pilot and cabin crew to ensure the aircraft's safety and to calm the panic. Soon, we managed to escape the dire situation. The aircraft gradually stabilized. When we safely landed and saw the airport, I felt a wave of relief, but the job wasn't done yet. As the captain, I apologized for the incident and then wished all passengers and crew success in their future endeavors before finishing my duties. Of course, the image of one particular mentor crossed my mind. Later, the details of the malfunction that had troubled the aircraft were revealed. It turned out that a certain part was damaged. Despite thorough double checks, I wondered why the maintenance had been neglected. When the authorities analyzed the camera footage, it was revealed to be Donald's doing. The malfunction was intentional. Initially denying the accusations, Donald's face flushed the moment I appeared. Noticing something was off, everyone turned their gaze towards me. I summarized my relationship with Donald. It's all in the past. How long will you hold on to it? That's why you're foolish. My impromptu remark seemed to make Donald realize he had dug his own grave. He tried to deny it hastily, but it was too late. The gaze of everyone present turned towards Donald. I'm not the timid person I used to be. Looking Donald in the eye, I made it clear. The one who's been holding on to the past is you. You intended this as harassment against me, but do you realize how many lives you endangered with your actions? Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? Prompted by my words, those present began to voice their criticism towards him. Donald, looking pale and shrinking away, eventually broke down and apologized, but that couldn't erase the crime he committed. He admitted his guilt, faced disciplinary action, and was criminally charged, leading to his dismissal. His actions, both past and present, certainly cannot be forgiven. However, I couldn't help but feel pity for Donald, who had driven himself to this point by fixating on and trying to sabotage another person. A few days later, Susan and I went out for a meal together. Susan had invited me, asking, "Would you like to go out for a meal together on our next day off?" Being an excellent cabin attendant, Susan always looked dignified and beautiful, but in her casual clothes, she seemed even more so. I had secretly been attracted to her for a long time, but I had nearly given up on the idea, thinking that someone 8 years my junior could never be interested in me. However, our relationship rapidly grew closer following that incident. Could it be the suspension bridge effect? No, maybe it's slightly different. As I was eating, pondering over such thoughts. "Brian, you were really cool the other day," Susan said. I was at a loss for words, and Susan smiled softly. "What do you mean?" "When there was trouble, you gave calm instructions, right? Thanks to you, I was able to act calmly too. It was wonderful." It was an embarrassing compliment, but I feel responsible for involving so many people in my problem with Donald. That humble side of you is also wonderful. Are you teasing me? Not at all. Susan covered her mouth with her hand and smiled gently. Her surprising statements didn't end there. "I'm the type to make a move on someone I'm interested in," she said. I was stunned. I could feel my face turning red. Then, Susan and I started dating. We both travel a lot for work, in the sky or abroad, but she always wanted to go overseas even in her private time. I also love flying, so traveling together is a great joy. France, Canada, Vietnam, Hawaii. We've made many memories in various places with her. Each time, I felt the wounds in my heart healing. I'm planning to propose to her soon. I intend to invite Mr. Richard to our wedding. It must be the strange connection that he helped forge. That's what I felt. She's not family, that's why he sent her home. How could she say such a thing about my mother? That one's just a housekeeper. This is a family trip, right? Those without blood ties are strangers. She's probably tending to the fields I told her to buy now. My grandfather said too, laughing. My father and I were shocked. Cut the crap. What would happen after his shouting? My name is Hannah, and I'm 17 years old now. I live in the rural area, which is still common to have extended families living together. My friends' homes are the same, and of course, so is ours. My paternal grandparents, my parents, and I live together. Living together is one thing, but what comes with it is the constant harassment. Hey, Olivia, isn't the seasoning in today's meal a bit strong? Well, it might be just right for our son and grandchild, but it's a bit much for us old folks. Sorry about that. I thought I was being careful. Careful, huh? And it's still this salty? Are you trying to shorten our lives by feeding us all this salt? Right, it's common for wives to cold-heartedly bully us frail elderly. You know, the wife in the house next door also. Come on, it started again. My grandparents always find some way to make snide remarks to my mother, Olivia. It's always about something so unreasonable. Like today's dinner, it's not even that salty. Moreover, she's prepared separate portions for us and for the grandparents, seasoning them differently. I tried tasting it, and indeed, the elderly portion is bland. To me, the seasoning is far from enough. How can this be considered high in salt? Maybe it's better not to season it at all. Although my mother, who is used to it, just nodded along, I couldn't stand it and fought back. Grandpa, give it a rest. This is super lightly seasoned already. If you still think it's bland, why don't you taste your own sweat? A kid should be quiet. If Grandpa says it's too strong, then it's too strong. That's right. Hannah, you're just a kid, you wouldn't understand. For us elderly, it's quite strong. Your mother could make it lighter. That's why she's a bad wife. Hannah, make sure you don't turn out like her. Well, I love my mother's cooking. Unlike some tasteless old geezers. I'm in my rebellious phase, so there's no way I'm just going to take it and say okay. Catching a glimpse of my mother, she just hung her head, looking troubled, without retorting. She must have felt my gaze because she looked at me and gave me a weary smile. That tired smile pained my heart. It's not just about the cooking. Day in and day out, my grandparents always have something terrible to say to her. Like how she does the laundry wrong, or how her cleaning is not up to snuff. They even insist that leftovers are good enough for my mother's lunch, and that she should shower last. The list goes on. What era do they think this is? It's like something out of old drama series, these torments. The coldness my grandparents show my mother has another reason. It's because my parents keep their distance from my grandparents' peculiar faith. Instead of Christ, my grandparents worship Satan daily. They seem to blame my mother for my father, their son, being utterly indifferent to their faith. Their frequent saying is, "That one, Satan will drop into hell." My busy father is often away, and I come home late from the sports lessons. During that time, my housewife mother is left alone with my grandparents. Dad, Grandpa and Grandma were saying awful things to Mom again. They even suggested she's plotting something, saying the seasoning was strong when it was clearly bland. I reported to my father, who came home late at night. Honestly, I hate to bother my already tired father with such stories. But as his daughter, I just can't stay silent, can I? Man, happened again? Those two really are something. They don't realize that thanks to Olivia managing the house, they can enjoy their carefree retirement. It's all thanks to you too. I'm always grateful. Dear, it makes me happy to hear you say that. Hannah, you're such a good girl. No, I'm currently in my rebellious phase. It's just that my rebellion is aimed at my grandparents, so I'm less harsh on my parents. That's how much I dislike, or rather, detest my grandparents. Don't worry about it, Hannah. I'll talk to them. Just keep being on your mom's side, okay? My father said, patting my head, half irritated at being treated like a child, but also half pleased. Teenage emotions are complicated. One Sunday, I woke up late and lazily got out of bed, only to find my father arguing with grandmother. Enough already, Mom! My father's shouting voice snapped me to full alertness. Peeking into the living room, I saw my grandmother sitting on the sofa, looking grumpy. My father stood in front of her, and his face beat red with anger.
Making her work in the fields on such a cold day, what are you thinking?
He shouted. He is a regular office worker, but my grandparents are farmers, true to their rural roots. Though the size of their fields has greatly reduced due to old age. Field work? Is Grandpa doing it? Looking outside, I saw nothing but a white snowy landscape. The fields must be covered in snow. Is there something they're concerned about? When I was just thinking how dangerous it is for the elderly to work in the fields in such cold weather.
Oh, I'm starving. What's all this ruckus about? Where's Olivia? Isn't lunch ready yet?
My grandfather came in, scratching his belly. Okay, he is here. Wait, that means...
Wait, don't tell me Mom's.
My mother does indeed help out with my grandparents' farm work occasionally. But it's only during the harvest or busy times, generally, she doesn't. That's what I thought, but...
That's exactly it. I asked Mom where Oliver went, and she wouldn't say, so when I pressed her, what's the need to do anything in such snow?
Then she really went out. Oh my goodness.
Well, managing the fields during winter is crucial. I know that. I'm asking if it's necessary in the snow.
Snow repeatedly freezes and melts, messing up the soil. If you don't remove the snow, it'll be trouble in spring.
Lies. I remember hearing that when snow covers the ground, it's best to leave it be. You deal with snow before it falls or after the ground thaws.
Huh, is that so? Well, it's not the time to be impressed.
Anyway, Dad, we need to get Mom quickly.
Right, that was the point. Mom, let's talk later, okay? It's unbelievable that my mother has been working alone in such snow. Besides, it's starting to snow again. My father and I hurriedly put on our coats, boots, and dashed out of the house. She was there in the field. Exhaling white breath, her face red, she was shoveling snow. My father rushed over to her, and she gave a feeble smile. That smile again pained my heart. Why didn't I notice? While I was leisurely sleeping till noon, how many hours had she been shoveling snow? Being busy with work he brought home, my father hadn't noticed either and kept apologizing to the exhausted her. Sorry, Mom. Really sorry. That day, my grandmother got scolded by my angry father.
You will be the one to fall into hell.
After that, my grandparents were unusually quiet for a while. Seasons turned, and summer was approaching. The new term would start, and I would finally be in 12th grade.
How about going on a trip?
My father suggested. We have not traveled for a long time. After all, it's unlikely to go on family trips after high school graduation. Understanding the lonely feelings of a father, I pretended it was a hassle, but inside, I was excited. After all, parents pay for everything on family trips. There will be plenty of activities to do.
Oh, that sounds nice. How about a beach?
My rising spirits dropped at my grandmother's words.
Wait, are you coming too?
I regretted saying it immediately. Stepped on a landmine.
What a terrible grandchild. Planning to leave us out. A kid like that, Satan will.
She started, and eventually,
Olivia. It's because of your poor upbringing that Hannah has grown into such an unthoughtful child. What a useless, no good mother.
She began taking it out on my mother.
Hey! I might have said something wrong, but it's not fair to blame Mom for that. Oh, how sad for a grandma to have such a cold grandchild. It's all because Oliver didn't discipline properly. Woe is me.
Seriously? Woe is me, she actually said that. Astonished, I decided to give some payback by saying out loud,
Stop joking!
However, she continued to fake cry, while my grandfather nodded in agreement. Seeing the chaotic situation, my father sighed and tried to settle things. All right. How about we go together? Instantly, my grandmother's face lit up with a smile. Despite the troublesome situation, I was also looking forward to the trip. The day arrived. Living in the countryside, the airport was far. After hours' drive, we still had plenty of time before the scheduled flight. It's been a while since I visited the airport, so I wandered off from my family. When I thought it was about time and returned, I saw my grandparents sitting on the waiting chairs. Looking around for my parents, my father came back, munching on something. Looks tasty, Dad.
Yeah, this is really good.
You were eating something in the car, right? But I was also hungry, so I asked for one.
Olivia, you want it? Oh, where's she?
With a snack in hand, my father looked around. Hannah, do you know where Mom is? Weren't you with her, Dad?
No, she said she'd stay and watch the luggage. We said we'd go for a walk.
Hey Grandpa, do you know where Mom is? His response was unclear. Grandma, was Mom here when you came back? Yes, she was. So she was here. Maybe she's in the restroom? But no matter how long we waited, she didn't return. I checked the restroom, but she wasn't there. Looking around, there was no sign of her. Finding it strange, my father said with looking troubled,
It's almost time for departure. Where could Olivia be?
Is it time for boarding already? Then let's head over. Although my grandmother must have heard the conversation, she stood up without concern.
Mom, we need to look for Olivia.
She's not here, you know.
What?
Confused, my father tilted his head. I also looked at her. With a malicious smile, she said,
That one's not family. That's why I sent her home. What the hell?
My father was shocked, and then my grandfather said with a laugh,
She's just a housekeeper. This is a family trip, right? A wife without blood ties is a stranger. She's probably doing the fieldwork I ordered by now. What freaking are you saying?
We were just stunned, whereas they were laughing, unconcerned. Not family. What's that about? Mom's not family, then what is she?
What's that? Cut the crap. Olivia is my precious wife. Wife or not, a stranger is a stranger. She's the bad stranger who ensnared our dear son. Right, I never liked her from the start. That's why I disciplined her. A stranger, not working, just squatting in our house, she should at least do some farm work. Let's say, what was it? Right, a neat. Just like a neat.
They were chuckling with a vulgar laugh. I was so furious, and my vision turned red. I was about to say something when my father, quicker than me, stood in front of my grandparents and shouted,
Don't mess with me. Yikes!
My father's voice echoed throughout the space. In the busy and crowded place, his voice resonated surprisingly far. Without caring about other passengers who stopped in their tracks, wondering what was going on, he continued to yell,
Always just harassing Olivia with your petty torments. You think I don't know anything? I know it all.
Yes, I always tattle.
And just when I thought you reflected on that snow incident, you pull this childish stunt. What's so fun about this? Ryan, we were just trying to educate that woman for your sake. What education could you vile people possibly give? It should be you who needs to be educated.
Ryan.
How dare you speak to your parents like that? Dad, you said Olivia was a stranger, right? She is my precious wife. My beloved wife. The most important family to me. You say that my family member, Olivia, is not your family, that she's a stranger. Then I'm a stranger too. You two and I are strangers. Ryan, what are you saying? What am I saying? That's my line. Do you even realize what you're saying, what you're doing?
My grandparents' faces got paled at his fury. I had never seen him so angry. It must have been the same for my grandparents. My grandmother looked like she might burst into tears any moment. However, my grandfather gave a wry smile at my father's state. It infuriated me even more to see him laugh it off. Listen, Ryan. Calm down. He seemed to want to somehow control his son, to maintain his dignity as a father.
Anyway, we're running out of time. Let's just have Olivia give up this time. And, well, let's just go, just us. The gate close is almost here. And we don't want to waste the cancellation fee for the hotel we booked.
What? Wait, what is he even saying? Expecting Mom to give up this time? Whose fault does he think this is?
Whose fault do you think this is?
My inner thoughts and my father's shout coincidentally overlapped. My grandfather let out a startled yelp.
That's enough. If you want to go, then just go on your own. No, you guys were supposed to come too.
Oh, I'm not family either, so it's fine.
Hannah.
As I casually responded, her face showed shock. What? Did she think I would go along with them? As a daughter of a non-family mother, I am not family either.
No way. You're family. You have a blood connection.
My bond with my mother is stronger. At a loss for words, my grandparents could only snort in response. I turned to my father. Let's go home, Dad. Mom is waiting.
Yeah, that's right. I'll call her soon after.
Okay, let's do that. Carrying our bags, we headed for the exit, followed by my flustered grandmother.
Hey, wait! What about us? What's going to happen to our trip?
That's not our problem. Go on your own. And preferably, don't come back.
What about the money?
If you want to go, pay for it yourselves.
No way!
Her voice echoed around us. My grandfather stood dumbfounded. Leaving them behind, we headed home, where my mother was waiting. She was seemingly happy, perhaps because we had called from the car, but I didn't miss it. Her eyes were red. There were traces of tears. Those two, I'll never forgive them. Hey, Dad, I've been thinking.
That's a coincidence, so have I.
While hugging my mother, I spoke to my father and sensed him nodding in agreement. That night, my grandparents, having few money for the trip, returned home huffing and puffing. They could have taken a taxi by promising to pay upon arrival or borrowed money from a police station near the station to take the bus. But they didn't even know or understand such things. That's just like them. I guess it served as a good punishment. At first, they were extremely apologetic, but in front of my mother, they began to grow bolder again.
We did nothing wrong. That woman is to blame.
But my father had enough.
That's it. We're finding a new house and moving out. We're cutting ties. I don't care about your old age.
He made an unexpected declaration. My grandparents were pale, but his determination didn't waver. He temporarily moved my mother and me to a hotel and hurried to find a new house. He found a good property convenient for his commute and my school. Dad, you are so reliable. Then, on moving day,
please, we apologize for everything up to now. Don't abandon us.
My grandmother was begging, crying.
What are we supposed to do if you two leave us?
My grandfather was nearly in tears. I don't care. With a dismissive tone, my father left the grandparents in despair.
Olivia, please. We're sorry for everything. We won't do it again. We'll recognize you as family. So let's go back to how things were, okay?
Astonishingly, to whom Grandma pleaded was my mother. After all the terrible things they've done, how conveniently self-serving. Feeling disgusted, I saw my mother take my grandmother's hand. With a bright smile on my mother's face, just as her face lit up in response, my mother said, "Judgment from the grand white throne."
Huh?
Satan sees all the anger in this world.
What are you talking about?
The day to kneel before Satan is near. You'd better prepare your excuses. I hope you make it to heaven.
Wait, hey, wait.
Goodbye. Leaving the speechless grandparents behind, we got into the car. As we drove away from their house, I glanced back once to see them standing there, dumbfounded. They were getting further and further away, and I realized that might be the last time I see them. Inside the car, heading to a new beginning, as I chuckled at the passing scenery, my mother looked at me curiously.
What's up?
Well, just feeling a bit envious.
Of what?
Of Dad. He said, my precious wife, my beloved spouse, the most important family member to me.
Really? Hannah, what are you spilling?
Oh my, still so lovey-dovey after all these years. Really makes one envious.
Come on, no kidding.
My mother, blushing, lightly tapped my head. It didn't hurt, but I pretended it did and rubbed my head, then added, I wish I could have a boyfriend like Dad soon. Right after that,
A boyfriend.
his pained cry echoed through the car, holding the steering wheel.
I got a huge sum of money, and you just got an old house and a mere field?
My brother Robin, who unexpectedly received a large inheritance, mocks me.
To think that this is how they treat their daughter who has always taken care of and nursed them. You must not have been loved.
His words are infuriating, but I don't talk back. Just you wait. I won't let this setback keep me down. Driven by anger towards Robin, I worked hard to restore the neglected field. My name is Carol, a 50-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband Justin for 25 years, and our children have all grown up and become independent. I thought we could live a peaceful and enjoyable life together, just the two of us. But life doesn't always go as planned. As soon as our children became independent, I began to take care of our parents. Justin's parents had passed away long ago, so the ones I cared for were my own. My parents, who ran a farm, were always confident in their physical strength and were the picture of health. I often helped them, especially during the harvest season. The freshly picked vegetables were truly delicious. Juicy and sweet vegetables. I fondly remember them because I can no longer savor that taste. My parents couldn't defy aging and had to retire as their legs grew weaker.
I really wanted to continue for longer.
My father Stuart said with a weak smile.
I wish I could let Carol taste those vegetables again.
My mother Olivia expressed her regret.
It would have been great if Robin had taken over.
My father said, feeling down. I have an older brother, Robin, 2 years older than me. Robin has always been irresponsible, acting on a whim and doing whatever he pleases. He barely attended high school and eventually dropped out, claiming it was too much trouble. He left home, never settling into a steady job, working odd jobs here and there, and then would suddenly return home to demand money from our parents. Yet, because he is their son, they couldn't be harsh to him. Robin also stopped visiting the house after our parents quit farming.
There will be no money received from parents living on a pension,
he used to say. If there's no money, he has no business with them. As much as he is my brother, he's the worst. I try to forget such brother exists, but he's still family. Sometimes, even my parents would worry.
I wonder if that child is doing all right,
they would say. But after they quit farming, they aged quickly. Maybe things would have been different if they had continued farming, even just as a hobby. By the time I started regretting it, they had already aged significantly and both became bedridden.
Sorry, Carol. We're causing you trouble.
My apologetic father and mother were met with my smiling denial. I am who I am today because of you both. Let me repay you. As I said this, my mother teared up and thanked me. Taking care of them was hard work, but my children were already independent, and I wasn't working since I was a housewife. I had thought about getting a part-time job once the kids were independent, but we weren't struggling financially, so I could put that off. After discussing with Justin, I decided to stay at my parents' house to take care of them.
I don't think they have much time left.
The shock of hearing this from the doctor was immense. I called Robin, crying.
Won't you come to see our parents?
Irresponsible as he may be, Robin is still my brother. To our parents, he is their beloved son. Surely, Robin remembers being loved by them. That's why I wanted him to see them one last time, but Robin's answer was terrible.
Huh? Why should I?
I'm busy, you know.
Busy? Are you working? Like I'd bother with that.
Yeah, I'm doing day labor.
I worked yesterday, so I thought I might go see some horses today. Going to see horses? You mean betting on horse racing, right?
As expected, Carol, you know me well.
What are you thinking? You prioritize gambling over visiting our parents?
It's more important to me than life itself.
You're the worst!
Furious at Robin's extremely disappointing behavior, I hung up the phone. After that, Robin never came to visit our parents at all. Day by day, both of them continued to weaken. And then, suddenly, my father passed away, followed by my mother the next day. They were a loving couple until the end. Once I had finished crying, busy time awaited me. Organizing a funeral for both of them was a huge task. With Justin's help and our 2 sons, we somehow managed it. It should have been something to discuss and arrange with Robin, but he never showed up. I managed to contact him, but...
Huh? Our parents' funeral?
I'm busy, I won't come.
Just handle it however on your end.
And with that, he hung up the phone. Handle it however? That's not possible. Even at 52, Robin remains incredibly irresponsible. Angry at Robin, the tearful funeral came to an end. And then, some time later, Robin finally returned to our family home. It was outrageous he didn't even come to the funeral, but the reason for his return was simple. It was to discuss the inheritance.
Hey, Carol, long time no see. You've aged quite a bit.
Leave it alone. You've aged too, Robin.
I'm still younger looking than you, since I'm single and didn't age from raising kids. Maybe I look like your younger brother now?
I was appalled that these were his first words after meeting his sister for the first time in a while. Despite claiming to enjoy his bachelor life, Robin looked significantly aged.
Did you visit their graves? Why would I do such a meaningless thing?
Do you think the dead can see that? It's not about that. I was irritated by Robin's attitude, showing no sense of loss for our parents, but arguing with him was pointless. I decided it was best to get the discussion over with quickly and took my seat. Well then, let's proceed, please. I said this to the lawyer present. Indeed, our parents had prepared a proper will. Under the supervision of the lawyer, we began to open the will.
What does it say? What's my share? Hold on a minute.
Robin eagerly leaned in as soon as the envelope was opened. I sighed at his impatience. Before my exasperated gaze, the lawyer spread out the will. As a result, Robin was to inherit cash. I was to inherit the family home and the field, the workplace where our parents had toiled. Upon hearing this, Robin,
Haha. Can you believe that? That's just great, isn't it hilarious?
Bursted out laughing. Cash, it's this statement, right? Wow, $300,000? Is this for real? Amazing. Farming really pays off. Along with the will, there was a bank account statement kept by the lawyer. It was indeed a significant amount. For Robin, who never had a steady job and lived day to day, this was a fortune. I was also a bit surprised to learn such an amount was left behind. Though they worked hard, my parents, whose hobbies and entertainment were farming, probably didn't have much use for money.
And? What about you, Carol?
With a mocking smile, Robin looked at me, still laughing. His question revealed his unpleasant character, even though he had heard the contents of the will. This house and the field.
Ha ha ha. Really?
Robin, holding his stomach, laughed heartily. Patience, just be patient. I reminded myself desperately, trying to contain my anger.
I get a huge sum of money, and you just get an old house and a mere field.
Robin said amidst his intense laughter.
This is how they treat their daughter who took care of and nursed them? You weren't loved at all.
I felt my blood boil but somehow managed to hold back. Arguing here would be meaningless. Indeed, the value of this house and field combined doesn't come close to the cash amount Robin inherited. Our parents wanted me to keep this house and field, our family home. So, I must endure. I know better than anyone that my parents loved me.
Well, the eldest son is always loved, right? And I was the favorite son. I can understand why our parents felt that way.
Finally stopping his laughter, Robin flaunted the bank account statement right in front of my eyes. So, that's how it is. I'm taking this with me. As if it was that simple. I didn't want any disputes over the inheritance later. The lawyer had prepared the documents, so Robin signed them and left. The moment Robin was out of sight.
Never come back!
I shouted. I'll forget about Robin. Likely, I'll never meet him again. Forgetting such a despicable person is best, a realization that came to me a year after my parents passed away. After completing various inheritance documents and procedures, and as I was clearing out the now empty family home, time seemed to fly by. Now, the once busy family home was empty. I have a house built by Justin, and to live here, as Robin said, is too old-fashioned. Maybe I should sell it sensibly. But the thought of losing my childhood home feels sad. Lost in these thoughts, I sat in the empty house. Suddenly, my eyes caught sight of a hoe in the garden. In this day and age, it's rare to use a hoe. Yet, my father preferred to use it. Stored out of reach during my childhood for safety. The iron part was now completely rusted and the handle severely decayed. It barely retained its original shape, but I touched it gently. What came to mind was the image of my father joyfully working in the fields, sweating, with my mother laughing beside him. Those were nostalgic, dearly cherished times. Quietly closing my eyes and indulging in these memories, I opened them with resolve and decided. All right. Farming? Yeah. Well, it's more like an extension of home gardening, a hobby. Isn't that nice? Having inherited the field, I thought to try something with it. When I discussed it with Justin, he easily agreed. Really? It's the field your parents left behind, you should try it. I couldn't be more grateful for Justin's support. With advice from a farmer acquaintance of my father, I began tending to the neglected field. I tried growing the same vegetables my father did, as well as experimenting with new varieties. It turned out to be a challenging task. Farming is hard. I had some experience with home gardening. But this was a whole different level. Not just the vastness of it, but also because these weren't just vegetables for personal consumption. Doing it seriously is this tough. Reviving the depleted soil alone was a challenge. Deciding on the right vegetables for the soil was tough. What about the seasons? The pests? Wild birds, too, turned out to be adversaries. Not only did I have to grow the crops, but I also had to think about protective measures. The work didn't progress easily, and I encountered many failures. I can't believe you're doing all this. As a rich man like me, it's unimaginable. That was Robin, who had called just to look down on me. Somehow, he had heard that I had started farming and called to comment. As usual, his words were discouraging, so I quickly hung up. Forget it. I have to forget that. Channeling my anger towards Robin into motivation, I tirelessly worked on the field. Farming equipment, even secondhand, was expensive, but I considered it a necessary investment and used my savings. It's your savings, so I won't say anything. The generous Justin said that to me. Although it was my savings, any money I had from before I was married was long gone, and what I used was really money Justin had given me for my allowance, saved over time. Even so, Justin didn't mind and supported me, which moved me to tears. I fell in love with him all over again. My sons also helped, researching on the internet and sharing information with me. The farmers who were acquaintances of my father were all kind people. Apart from the infuriating Robin, I was truly in a blessed environment, which allowed me to focus on farming. What started as a hobby quickly became a passion, and I got serious about it. I guess I really am my parents' daughter. As I thought this, time passed by. And then, I did it. Finally, the first harvest from my field. Though the produce wasn't as succulent and sweet as my parents', the yield was modest. What mattered was that I had accomplished it. I felt satisfied. Hey, not bad for a first-timer. Those encouraging words came from Mike, a farmer who had been a great help. He had always been concerned about the condition of my field. Mike's praise, reminiscent of a man about the same age as my father, deeply touched my heart. Adjust the amount of fertilizer and water a bit more. Ah yes, Stuart used to use that particular fertilizer. There was still so much I didn't know. Gathering every bit of information I could, I was determined to get closer to replicating my parents' tastes. Gradually, the field became more impressive. What started as a small corner was now a fully tended field. Days of trial and error with various crops. Gradually, the quality of the vegetables I grew improved, and eventually.
Wow, another bountiful year.
Thank you. Please continue to supply to us.
Of course, thank you very much.
My vegetables had reached a point where they could be sold. I even gained a favored business partner. A TV station even came to do a feature on me, a housewife who started farming and found success. Before I knew it, the vegetables I grew had become popular. But I couldn't have done it alone. Many people helped me, and above all, it was the wisdom my father had passed on to me. Yet, there was still much to do. I was far from achieving the taste of my father's produce. As I clenched my fist, determined to work harder, that's when I heard it.
What's this all about?
A voice I thought I had pushed to the edge of my memory. As I was about to head to the field, I heard the forgotten voice and turned around.
Robin!
It had been years. I could barely recognize him as Robin, but there was still a semblance of him. It wasn't just aging.
Robin, you've changed so much.
Yeah, I'm shining, right? But forget that. Noticing my gaze fixed on his head, Robin yelled angrily. However, his anger didn't frighten me at all. It's almost laughable. I want to laugh. But I knew laughing would only make things more complicated, so I desperately tried to hold it back. My cheeks were trembling, trying to suppress a smile. What brings you here, Robin? It's been a long time. I thought we would never meet again. I never expected Robin to visit the family home again. Robin pointed to the house standing tall behind me.
What is this?
He yelled. What do you mean? It's the house where you were born and raised.
I know that. But it used to be dirtier. Why is it so clean now?
Indeed, the once old and dirty house I had considered selling had been refurbished and was now quite beautiful. Why? Because I had it repaired.
Where did you get the money for that?
I earned it.
How?
I wish he wouldn't yell every time. Although we are approaching our 60s, my hearing is still fine. You know I started farming, right? The vegetables I grew on the field I inherited became popular, and the business is thriving.
What?
After many struggles and hard work, my business had finally taken off. And then Robin showed up. I had a bad feeling, and as expected, Robin began to insinuate.
So, that field had great value, huh?
Huh? What are you talking about?
There's no way a complete amateur like you could run a profitable farming business so easily.
Of course, it wasn't easy at all.
That land must have been golden soil, right?
He completely disregarded all the hard work I'd put in. And what's this about golden soil?
It must have been incredibly nutrient-rich, powerful soil, right? You knew that and kept quiet.
No, what are you talking about?
I know the law. If a property is later found to be more valuable, the inheritance can be redivided. I'm going to file an objection. We'll redo the inheritance division, and I'll take the field.
Are you stupid?
Yes, I'm stupid. I mean, no, I'm not.
Honestly, he is being stupid. I don't know where he got his information, but flaunting such superficial knowledge is just foolish. Sighing deeply. The value of the field hasn't changed. I said.
Liar!
Why would I lie? If you doubt it, why don't you have a real estate agent or someone appraise the land?
You said it, then I'll do just that. You'll regret this.
I won't. The land prices around here haven't changed much since the beginning.
Really?
If you doubt it, ask a real estate agent, like I said. Robin's confidence seemed to wane as I firmly stated this. His face began to cloud over with doubt. But you're actually making a profit, right? It's because of the field, right? Because of the field. Look, yes, I started farming because I had that land, and as a result, it's been profitable.
See, I told you so.
Ah, he's so annoying. I was gradually getting fed up with Robin's complete misunderstanding.
All right, enough.
Fed up with the conversation, I shouted dismissively.
Fine. Robin can use half of the field. Do whatever you like with it. Yeah.
Robin, as if he had achieved complete victory, thrust his fist into the air. But despite my dismissive shout, I was quite calm inside. Well, let him try. Robin never helped with the farming when our parents were around. I wondered how he would approach it. I'll be watching closely.
Help me.
Wow, that was quick. It had only been a month since Robin started farming. I divided the field in half and let Robin use the barren part, but he gave up within just a month and came asking for help. Huh? Help with what?
I have no clue what to do.
I thought as much. The field was poorly maintained, with no preparation for planting whatsoever. What had he been doing this past month?
It's strange, isn't it? This field is supposed to be golden soil, right? I sowed seeds, but why aren't they growing properly?
Still on about the golden soil, huh? And thinking that just sowing seeds is enough? If it was that easy to grow delicious crops, everyone would be doing it. You need to study more. Maybe in a few years, it might become profitable? I was about to dismiss him, but then Robin, looking like he might cry, pleaded with me. Please, no snotty tears.
Help me out. You're my sis, right? I don't want to think of someone who couldn't even come to our parents' final moments as a brother.
Don't start calling me sis just because you need something. I coldly brushed him off, and Robin hung his head right there.
I'm already busy with my own field. I got here with the help of many people. You should work hard and become someone who can also receive help. Like I said earlier, you need to persevere for a few years, and then. I can't afford to be leisurely about this.
I was about to leave Robin, who showed no willingness to try, but then he looked at me with a serious expression.
I can't wait years or even months. I'm on the brink of a debt repayment deadline.
He shouted.
Debt. Yes. I have huge debts.
Why? You inherited $300,000 in cash, right? I spent it.
What? I poured it all into gambling, and now it's all gone. What?
I hated the idea of working again, so I tried to make a big win with loans, but that's gone too. Then I heard you were making money from farming, so I thought I'd try it too. But why isn't it working for me? Why am I not making any money?
How should I know?
I was astounded and lost for words. Robin had squandered the significant inheritance from our parents in just a few years. And now he thought he could easily make money from farming? It was ridiculous.
Carol, please, I'm begging you to help.
I refuse. No matter how much Robin pleaded, I couldn't bring myself to help him. Maybe if he had shown some determination to try on his own, I might have offered some assistance. But Robin was always relying on others. His irresponsibility unchanged.
Please, help me. The debt collectors are coming soon.
I left Robin shouting and walked away from the field. I don't know what became of him after that. I heard rumors that he was being chased by debt collectors. But nothing beyond that. Eventually, the field returned to my care. The farming, now on a larger scale, was going well. Justin, who helped on his days off, massaged my shoulders as I worked.
Maybe I could join you in farming after I retire?
Justin had recently suggested this. And it made me very happy. Our sons also seemed quite interested, maybe they'll join in too. The house and field protected by my father and loved by my mother. I wonder if my parents would be pleased to see them come back to life.
Dad, Mom, I'll keep taking care of the field.
Aiming to recreate the delicious vegetables they grew, I'll keep working hard. So please, both of you, watch over us.
Joanna, it's about Walton's memorial dinner, but I doubt anyone will show up. It's my wedding day, so everyone prefers a celebration. What do you mean?
My Sael, Carolina, intentionally set her wedding date to coincide with the anniversary of our grandson's passing, a year after his death.
Come on, Joanna, you've become so forgetful without Walton that you can't even understand English anymore.
I was infuriated by Carolina's unapologetic demeanor. I was fed up with Carolina's manipulative words and actions, and my husband, Darren, seemed indifferent.
Well, for me, seeing my sister in her wedding dress is more important, so you can go to the memorial dinner alone.
Faced with Carolina and Darren's cold attitudes, I came up with a plan. All right, I'll consider what you said. Today, after 25 years as a housewife, Joanna, I saw a text from Darren and felt down again.
Staying over there again?
I muttered to myself. Darren works at his father's company and is so busy that he often stays at his family home near the company instead of our house. It was foolish of me to hope he might come home early today, since it's my birthday. I sighed while preparing an unusually lavish dinner.
Maybe he's just really busy.
I talked to the sky, trying to convince myself. Though we met through a friend's introduction, Darren has always prioritized his family home over me. I tried to dismiss the thought that my in-laws must have said something, prompted by Darren's frequent, "I'll be staying at my parents' house." I want to trust Darren, but even on the rare days he is home, we are invariably interrupted by calls from his sister, Carolina, summoning him frequently. Carolina, Darren's sister, is 17 years younger than him and, according to him, indescribably cute. Darren would always tell me, "I'll definitely spend my next day off with you and the kids," a promise that never materialized, making me feel like Carolina was disrupting our family life. As I was about to prepare dinner, my motivation drained, staring at a carrot when my son, Morris, called.
Mom? Happy birthday!
Morris, thank you. Morris's casual words warmed my heart, and I struggled to hold back tears. Mom, is it like that again today? Morris, who married at 23 and now lives with his wife, Rothy, has known since childhood that Darren seldom comes home. Seeing me clearly downcast because Darren hasn't come home, Morris, who grew up witnessing this, still worries about me and calls, even now that he's grown. Especially today, on my birthday, when he learned Darren wouldn't be coming home again, Morris said with an unusually serious tone.
Mom, you must be feeling lonely without Dad, right?
Yes, I am. How about we come to live with you?
What?
I was thrilled by Morris's suggestion, but worried that Rothy might not agree. I casually mentioned it to Rothy before, and she seemed happy about it. Morris, sensing my anxiety, responded with a clear and cheerful voice.
Really? Rothy's okay with it? Of course. She likes the food you make. She said she'd be happy to eat it every day. Thank you. Then, I'll prepare your room and ask Dad if it's okay.
I usually expected Darren to ignore this, but I felt like I received a birthday present from Morris, thinking he might listen this time. A ray of sunshine seemed to break through my gloom. Later, Morris and Rothy moved into our house. Even on the day they moved in, Darren didn't come home, but I was so happy they were here that I hardly minded. When I put effort into cooking, both Morris and, of course, Rothy were happy, making our meals always lively and enjoyable. Though Darren rarely came home, their presence meant I didn't feel lonely and enjoyed peaceful days. Then one day, Rothy felt unwell and decided to go to the hospital. It had been 4 months since they moved in with us, and she had never been seriously sick or injured before, so I was filled with anxiety. Morris's face, tense despite saying it'll be okay as he left for the hospital with Rothy, stuck in my mind. I tried to shake off the bad feeling by putting more energy into my chores than usual. However, my anxiety soon vanished.
Mom!
While I was hanging laundry on the balcony, Morris was coming home, waving at me with the biggest smile.
Welcome back, both of you. How did it go?
Rothy smiled and gave me a cute okay sign, gently stroking her belly.
Could it be? Yes. I'm pregnant. Wow. Congratulations.
I felt so full of warmth and joy, as if every cell in my body was trembling with happiness. Leaving the laundry halfway done, I went out to them.
Mom, you came out for us? Of course, I'm thrilled just thinking about our first grandchild. I was told it would be difficult for me to get pregnant, so I'm really happy.
Rothy lovingly placed her hand on her belly.
Rothy, congratulations. Feel free to lean on me as much as you need. Thank you.
From that day on, it was a whirlwind of activity. We had to gather everything needed for Rothy and the baby, organize the house, and there was plenty to do. Darren would occasionally join me for shopping, but inevitably, if Carolina called, he'd make excuses and head back to his family home, no matter where we were. Rothy's belly grew noticeably, but 3 months before her due date, something went wrong.
Rothy, are you okay?
Morris called out desperately, but seeing Rothy in so much pain, he decided to call an ambulance. Soon after, the ambulance arrived, and Rothy was carried away on a stretcher.
I'll go with Rothy, so could you, Mom, come later, please? Of course, I'll gather what's needed and take a taxi.
Morris nodded briefly, then got into the ambulance with Rothy, heading to the hospital.
I need to hurry, too.
I packed a bag with essentials for Rothy's imminent birth. I'll call Dad, see if I can get the day off work. Darren, standing worried, said something unusual, indicating his concern.
Really? You can do that?
Yeah. It's an emergency with our first grandchild, no time to work. Darren quickly made the call and was easily excused. While Darren was on the phone, I arranged a taxi and locked up the house. We arrived at the hospital, and heading to Morris, we heard, Rothy will have a cesarean section.
What should I do? I'm really anxious.
If you're not strong, Morris, Rothy will feel your anxiety.
You're right. I'm going to be a dad.
How long had it been since Rothy entered the operating room? The red in surgery sign seemed to loom for hours.
It's taking a long time.
Darren started shaking his knees intensely, almost as if to say he took off work for this.
Rothy is fighting hard.
Yes, and if you look so worried, the baby will be startled when born.
With a furrowed brow, Darren's irritation grew, and he silently went somewhere.
He went to make a call.
Yes. It was clear to us that despite taking time off to be here, Darren's frustration with the situation led him to call Carolina. As Morris and I grew increasingly anxious, Darren returned with a slightly relieved expression, glanced at the operating room, but sat down silently on the bench.
Rothy!
Morris murmured with a mix of worry and anxiety.
I'm worried about Rothy and the baby. It's been so long.
Yes, I didn't have a cesarean, so I'm not sure. It's worrying. In the heavy atmosphere, the operating room door finally opened, and the doctor came out. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Both mother and child are safe. Great, my precious time was wasted.
Darren complained but seemed concerned about the situation inside. Afterward, a nurse came out to speak with us. If you don't mind looking through the glass, you can see how they both are.
Through the glass?
At Morris's puzzled voice, the nurse made a complicated face and led us over. Beyond the guided glass, Rothy appeared to be sleeping exhaustedly. And as for the baby, it was connected to tubes, covered in some kind of case.
That child is our first grandchild.
Tears spilled from Darren's eyes, moved by the sight of the small baby fighting to live despite its frailty.
Rothy and the baby are really okay, right?
Morris desperately asked the nurse.
Yes,
But the baby weighs about 28 ounces and is very small, so it's in a critical situation needing to be connected to tubes for a while.
The joy of the baby's birth was short-lived as Morris and I were shaken by a wave of anxiety.
We have to send them all the strength we can.
I forced a cheerful voice and placed my hands on Morris and Darren's backs.
Yeah!
Darren nodded with a troubled face and quietly left the hospital. Back home, Darren began rummaging through a drawer.
The baby is a boy, right?
Yes, that's right.
What are you looking for?
That thing. Finally finding what he was looking for, Darren looked pleased with himself.
Now that the baby is born, we need to give him a name. You're naming him? Of course. He carries my blood.
Darren spread out a notebook, with Morris standing silently beside him, resigned that his words would be futile. Darren, oblivious to Morris, was serious as he faced the notebook.
He overcame a difficult birth. Let's name him Walton, hoping he leads a calm life.
Darren, surprisingly serious about the name, slowly moved the pen across the paper. Looking at the notebook with Walton written on it, Darren said with satisfaction,
"How about that? It's a good name, isn't it?" "Yes, thank you."
I was hopeful, seeing Darren's happy demeanor, that maybe he would start paying more attention to the family. However, there was one significant issue. Walton was too small to be discharged, and for a while, we were not allowed to meet him directly. Eventually, we were allowed to visit Rothy, so we went to tell her the baby's name.
"Rothy, how are you feeling?" "Dad named the baby. I'm okay. Thank you." "What name did he choose?"
Rothy turned her head towards Darren with effort.
"Walton. It's a good name, isn't it?"
Darren proudly said, spreading out the notebook with Walton handwritten on it. What a beautiful name. I'm so happy. Thank you. Even as she spoke, Rothy seemed unusually downcast, her face shadowed with gloom. I thought maybe the hospital life had worn her out, and considered leaving her be, but her expression was so troubled I had to ask.
"Rothy, are you okay? You look so down."
"Joanna." Rothy looked at me with tears brimming in her eyes, and I knew something was wrong.
"There's something I need to tell also to Morris and Darren."
Morris and Darren exchanged glances and then came closer to me.
"The thing is, we've been told Walton has a congenital disorder." "What? No way. But a disorder doesn't have to mean something serious."
Rothy, unable to hold back her tears any longer, trembled as she spoke.
"The thing is, it seems Walton doesn't have long to live."
Not long to live.
I unwittingly repeated Rothy's unexpected words.
"What do we do?"
A mix of fear and joy, sorrow, and happiness swirled together, creating a heavy atmosphere. Tears began to stream down Rothy's face as the tension broke. Rothy. Walton. Moved by the moment, Morris and I also began to cry, and eventually, we all cried until we had no tears left. After a good cry, Rothy, perhaps slightly toughened by becoming a mom, slowly began to speak.
"I want to create as many happy memories for Walton as possible." "Yeah, let's spend every possible minute with Walton."
Rothy, feeling a bit better, nodded and smiled. Half a year later, Rothy and Walton were discharged and came home. During that time, Darren stayed at his family home less than before, and we all prepared to welcome Rothy and Walton. We went out to places Rothy and Morris wanted to visit, adjusting to Rothy and Walton's health. Darren sometimes joined us, and other times he prioritized Carolina, but we focused on putting Walton first, thinking it was a bonus if Darren came along. Walton, who couldn't speak yet but whose expressions became increasingly lively, was adorable, and we showered him with love. After Walton could no longer travel, we spent time walking, sunbathing in the park, and he was adored by our neighbors. However, the joyful time flew by, and Walton passed away at just 3 years old. Rothy, looking at the sky as if to see her son again, murmured,
"Walton, it was short, but I enjoyed our time together."
Morris, too, looked up at the sky, tears rolling down his cheeks. I was filled with sorrow and didn't think I could move on quickly, but Darren soon returned to prioritizing Carolina and decreased his visits home. The days seemed colorless, as if a hole had been punched in my heart. Though we had no regrets for being there for Walton till the end, the emptiness was heavy. As days swiftly passed, we were soon approaching Walton's memorial dinner.
It's almost time for Walton's memorial dinner.
Rothy spoke to Walton's photo with a prayer in her heart.
We should share lots of memories of Walton. That's a great idea. We need to invite the neighbors who loved Walton.
As we talked, Darren, unusually at home on his day off, joined the conversation.
When is it?
Well,
Walton's anniversary is next month on the 14th, so that's our first choice if the venue is available.
I see. After confirming, Darren got ready and left the house. We exchanged puzzled glances, but Darren didn't return that day. The next day, I was busy arranging the memorial dinner, securing the venue, and ordering what we needed. I was about to call relatives and acquaintances when Carolina called.
Joanna? It's Walton's memorial dinner, but I doubt anyone will show up. It's my wedding day, so everyone prefers a celebration. What do you mean? Come on, Joanna, have you become so forgetful without Walton that you can't even understand English anymore?
Carolina was clearly mocking me.
So, I'm having my wedding on Walton's anniversary.
How do you even know the date? I asked, trying to keep my cool.
Obviously, Bro told me.
My anger rose at Carolina's unapologetic attitude.
Why would you do that? Whether it's his wife or grandson, I don't care. It's punishment for taking my bro away from me. He always spoils me.
Carolina said bluntly and hung up unilaterally. I was left dumbfounded, holding the phone for a while. Then, Morris and Rothy came in.
Mom, you look upset. What happened?
Snapped back to reality by Morris's words, I hesitated to tell them about Carolina.
Is it about Dad again?
Just as Morris asked, looking into my face, Darren came back home, right on cue. Feeling a sense of duty, I immediately called out to Darren.
We need to talk right now. What? Can't I have a moment of peace?
Ignoring Darren's complaints, I got straight to the point.
Carolina's wedding is on the same day as Walton's memorial dinner. What?
No way. In front of a surprised Morris and a confused Rothy, Darren responded indifferently.
Yeah, seeing my sister in her wedding dress is more important, so you can go to the memorial dinner by yourself. Dad, are you serious? Don't you care about Walton at all?
Morris trembled with anger, and Rothy started crying from shock.
Quite bold words towards your father. Naturally, as her brother, I'd rather celebrate my cute Carolina than mourn a child who won't come back.
Darren began saying outrageous things, but an idea crossed my mind, and I forced myself to suppress my emotions to intervene in their conversation.
All right, I'll consider what you said.
Morris and Rothy looked at me with their mouths agape as if their jaws would drop, but I nodded reassuringly, and they seemed to understand. On the day of the wedding, we arrived at the hotel venue. Since we had proceeded with the memorial dinner plans without Darren, he assumed he'd be the only one attending the wedding and sat with the bride's side. We were in mourning attire, standing out a bit, but we weren't breaking any wedding rules, so we remained dignified.
Huh?
Darren looked puzzled to see us.
Actually, we wanted to see Carolina in her wedding dress too.
We missed the invitation, so we asked your parents.
Figures, right?
Despite his words, Darren seemed satisfied, smiling contentedly. As the wedding began, Carolina, dressed in a pure white wedding gown, entered the venue and was surprised to see us. However, she couldn't interrupt the ceremony, especially in front of so many guests, and couldn't say anything, glaring at us in a way unbecoming of a bride throughout the ceremony. The ceremony ended peacefully, and we were there as the bride and groom and their families bid farewell to the attendees. As we were saying goodbye, a person recognized Morris and Rothy, your Walton's parents, aren't you?
Dr. Trenton.
The person who approached us was Walton's attending physician, who of course knew that today was Walton's anniversary. We really appreciated everything you did. Rothy, Morris, and I hugged Dr. Trenton. No, Walton was very brave until the end. It's been exactly a year today. Dr. Trenton hinted something, but we quickly understood what he meant. The groom, Robert, noticing the last attendees weren't moving, came over.
What's going on, Trenton?
Robert. Trenton looked troubled, glancing between Robert and us. Do you two know each other?
Yes. Robert is a junior colleague of mine.
Trenton scratched his cheek, looking unsure of what to do.
I've been wondering, what is your relationship with Carolina?
Robert asked us, puzzled why we were sitting on the bride's side despite it being our first meeting and our mourning attire. Carolina is my husband's sister, and this is my son, Morris, and his wife, Rothy. I see. And how did you come to know Trenton? Robert asked with genuine curiosity. Actually, we had a child with a congenital disorder. Dr. Trenton took care of him. Rothy answered, and Trenton nodded solemnly. Walton, our child, passed away last year and went to heaven.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Today is Walton's anniversary, isn't it? Such an important day coincided. I answered clearly, thinking Trenton's point was very valid. The bride chose this day for her wedding, knowing it was Walton's anniversary.
That's. Carolina insisted on this day, saying she wanted it no matter what. Was that on purpose? She said she loved children.
Robert looked incredulous, and after conveying something to Carolina and Darren, who were happily chatting, Carolina and Darren approached us with Robert.
What's this? I was just getting compliments from Bro on how beautiful I look.
Carolina snapped at Robert, oblivious to the tense atmosphere between us.
You insisted on having the wedding today, right? And you said you loved children. Yet, you knew it was Joanna's grandson's anniversary and still chose this day?
Carolina's face went pale, but she desperately tried to cover up.
I didn't know such a thing. It must be a coincidence, or you're lying.
Carolina's behavior was suspicious. Darren nodded along, but Robert, faced with Trenton's and our denial, clenched his lips and raised his voice.
Is that what a person does? Don't you know what's important? I'll have to reconsider the marriage.
At Robert's declaration, Carolina's complexion grew even paler, and she started to rant as her lie was exposed.
Why are you even here? It's all your fault. Weren't you supposed to be lonely at your memorial dinner?
Carolina approached me with such force that I thought she might grab me, and continued her tirade.
I'm the happy bride. It's absurd for you gloomy people to be here uninvited.
Her loud voice echoed through the spacious venue, attracting the attention of Carolina and Darren's father, Owen, and mother, Teresa, who hurried over. I was the one who let Joanna and her family in. It was an apology for my foolish daughter and son's behavior that I asked them to attend.
Dad, why would you do that? That's too much.
Carolina screamed, her fury unabated. If you don't understand why, then we're done with you. Darren too.
What? What did I do? I haven't done anything wrong, right? And why am I being disowned?
Owen, realizing his children were heartless like cyborgs, sighed deeply.
You've always said you wanted to live on your own. Reset everything and start over as a new individual.
Facing abandonment by their own father, Darren and Carolina lost the will to argue and fell to their knees. Unknown to many, the hotel where Carolina had her wedding was the same one Joanna and her family had visited for memorable trips with Walton. I had informed the hotel from the planning stages and had first explained the situation to Owen. With Owen's understanding and cooperation, after Carolina's wedding, we invited acquaintances to the same place for a memorial dinner, making it possible to attend both the wedding and the memorial dinner. When I explained to Owen, I was anxious about whether he would believe me, but Owen and the relatives were already disappointed with Carolina's behavior and Darren's patheticness, and they willingly helped. Afterward, Carolina divorced, and soon my divorce with Darren was finalized, and Darren left the house. Having cut ties with Owen, both lost their jobs and homes, and I'm not sure how they're managing now while paying compensation from the divorce trial. Considering the hurt they caused not only to Walton but also to Morris and Rothy, and their abusive words and past actions, I honestly feel they got what they deserved. Morris, Rothy, and I, watched over by Walton's smiling face, have come to live peacefully as if the storm had passed. And with the bad ties cut off, good fortune came our way.
Mom!
Today, Rothy, who felt something odd in her stomach and went to the hospital with Morris, returned home with beaming smiles.
Actually, we're expecting our second baby.
With my hands raised in joy, Morris and Rothy exchanged deeply moved glances. Soon, Walton will have a little brother. My name is Monica. Whenever I see a beautiful woman of my age, I think to myself, I've got to work on my skincare, or maybe lose some weight. But, before I know it, I'm saying I'll start tomorrow every day, and now I'm 42. Lately, even using a toner feels like a chore, so my skin is protected by a natural oil veil of my own making.
Hey Siri!
Tell me how to fix my lazy nature and become like Anne Hathaway by just sleeping. Today, I want to share a story from back when I was still all about self-improvement. Please listen. It happened about 15 years ago. I had been married to my husband Andy for 2 years, but we were still very much in honeymoon mode. That's because Andy had to go on a business trip alone just 6 months into our marriage. He was selected as a temporary replacement because the person originally meant to go fell ill. I wanted to scream, "Don't disrupt our newlywed life." But being a junior employee, he couldn't disobey his superiors. I wanted to go with him, but we had just married and still had our condo lease. Breaking the lease for a short assignment and then having to find a new place seemed too much. After discussing it, we decided
it would be more trouble to go together for such a short time. We can manage being apart.
So, just 6 months into our marriage, we ended up living separately. Finally, after about half a year, Andy's solo trip ended, and we could live together again.
Finally, we can spend time together.
I was filled with the desire to enjoy our newlywed life. But it didn't quite go as planned. Originally, when Andy had to go on his business trip, my mother-in-law, Violet, got angry.
Choosing to separate so early in your marriage, does Monica's love for Andy even exist?
She started visiting our house frequently to check up on us. Let me make it clear, our separation right after the wedding was a mutual decision. We talked on the phone every night and met every 2 weeks. Our love hadn't faded just because we were newlyweds living apart. But Violet believed that a wife should always follow her husband. She thought a wife's fulfillment came from being by her husband's side and taking meticulous care of him. She had a bit of an old-fashioned view. It seemed more like Violet wanted to do these things rather than being asked by her husband. To me, she looked like a self-satisfied, overbearing wife. Because of this, during Andy's business trip,
Monica is probably cheating on Andy by not going with him.
Violet had such misunderstandings. Andy tried hard to clear up these misunderstandings, so our relationship on the surface was fine. But Violet seemed to have grown to dislike me for letting her son go on his own. Given this background, Violet frequently came to our house for what she called daughter-in-law's work check. In short, it was to see if I was properly managing the household and treating Andy right. I wasn't doing anything wrong, so she could look all she wanted. If that would earn her trust, then so be it. First, she would come over unannounced and immediately start inspecting the bathroom and shower, looking for any dirt. A single hair or eyelash out of place meant I failed. She would yell at me if there was even a slight water stain on the shower mirror.
How can it be spotless every day when it's used daily?
I wanted to shout, I work too, you know? But I had to endure. Then the fridge was checked. If it didn't have Andy's favorite foods, she'd get mad. Once, fearing Violet's surprise checks, I kept donuts, Andy's favorite, in stock daily. Andy was happy eating them, but he ended up gaining weight, resembling a donut himself.
That couldn't be good. If I did everything Violet said, Andy might end up with lifestyle diseases.
Realizing the danger, I stopped keeping sweets in the house. Hang in there, Andy, until you lose some weight. But when Violet noticed the donuts were gone, she labeled me as cruel for not letting a tired Andy eat his favorite foods. I understood why Andy said he lost weight when he lived alone. Only I could extend Andy's life. Furthermore, if Violet found leftovers from last night's dinner in the fridge, she got angry.
If you can't even manage portion sizes, that's just basic.
But we're a newlywed couple and not that wealthy. Andy and I, both working, talked it over.
Let's cook meals in bulk to save on household chores.
And Andy finally suggested that. With his unpredictable working hours, Andy could hardly participate in housework. I believed it was fine for whoever could do it to handle it, so I didn't mind. I was more worried about Andy overexerting himself and getting sick. But Andy proposed this idea.
I don't want all the burden to fall on Monica.
He said so. We explained all this to Violet, and when Andy spoke, she stayed silent. But when it was just the two of us, she started saying all sorts of things as if her emotions were exploding. Andy told me I could ignore Violet's words, and even said I didn't have to let her into our house. But I couldn't do that. Whenever Violet came over, she was always waiting at the entrance when I returned from my part-time job. Additionally, she seemed to have become friendly with the neighbors her age, so when I saw them chatting and smiling. Look, she's back.
Ah, Monica, I was waiting for you.
I just couldn't choose not to let Violet in. Moreover, Violet told the neighbors, I'm helping because my son's wife can't do any housework. So, from the outside world, our household looked like a kind mother-in-law and a clueless, incompetent daughter-in-law of the modern times. Violet seemed pleased with the situation. You're lucky to have a good mother-in-law like me to teach you things. Every time she pointed something out, she said that.
Sorry, I don't think so at all. I'm a modern woman, I don't understand these things.
I'd like to tell her that, but then I'd just be playing into Violet's hands. It would only add to the useless daughter-in-law stories she shared with the neighbors. But my patience was reaching its limit.
I know you're newlyweds and new at a lot of things, but you're going to have to learn all this stuff so you don't get in trouble with Violet.
A neighbor said to me, and I felt last night's curry boiling up in my stomach. The neighbors didn't know what went on inside our house, and I hadn't corrected Violet's narrative, so it was understandable. The truth was it wasn't my fault, but Violet's rules were too overbearing. I was working and managing the housework, and more importantly, if Andy was satisfied, that should be enough. After all, this house was mine and Andy's house. But as a newlywed, I couldn't speak out. I would say it now, being stronger. But back then, I was young and wanted to maintain a good relationship with my mother-in-law. I thought enduring it was the right thing to do. I didn't openly refute Violet's words to the neighbors for the same reason. If I did it, I would have been labeled as a defiant young person. That was probably my mistake, Violet's behavior gradually escalated. She started staying for dinner and then overnight. This made it impossible for Andy and me to, well, never mind. Let's save that for a late-night adult channel talk. Haha. Well, for a newlywed couple, having her stay over was truly a nuisance. Even Andy complained that, "Even though she's my family, I can't relax with my mom around. That's strange." He was subtly supporting me and trying to prevent friction between me and Violet, so he must be stressed too. I felt sorry for Andy, coming home tired. A few times, Andy said to Violet, "Dad will get lonely, go home." But she said,
"It's okay, James told me to look after things. I'm representing him."
She used the authority of Andy's father, James, to her advantage. Andy's family is an old-fashioned type that believed in the wives should obey their husband's principle. Even at this time of being married, Andy still had some irrefutable disagreements with James. The ingrained senses could be frightening, but for me, getting scolded by my dad always hurt more than by my mom. In short, my father was like the last line of defense. My mother got angry sometimes, but angering my father felt like the end of the world. He was like a mental pillar. That was why I thought I understand Andy's feelings. And since Violet started eating dinner at our house, I had been messing up dinner more often. The breakfasts I made when Violet wasn't around had never failed since we got married. At first, I thought I had messed up, and I think Andy did too. I apologized to Andy. "Sorry, looks like I messed up." But Andy replied, "It's rare for you. Aren't you tired? Take a rest today." But only Violet exaggeratedly complained, "Wow, this is so salty, it'll shoot up my blood pressure." I thought it was salty too, and the taste could raise blood pressure, so I honestly apologized. But soon I started to wonder, was I failing so often? Even when the taste seemed fine during cooking, it would be too sweet or too salty at dinner. I even got checked at the hospital, but there was nothing wrong with me. Could it be? I thought, and on a whim, I made dinner on the day Violet visited and left the kitchen. And that happened just as I suspected. Violet was humming and heavily sprinkling salt into the pot. The strength in her right hand and shoulder, holding the salt, was like she was avenging her parents. She could have surpassed a professional baseball player with that. Humming nonchalantly, she was ruining my cooking. I thought I had to tell Andy. But that night, Andy was extremely tired. He had been doing overtime every day for over 3 weeks, and the project deadline was looming. Plus, our wedding anniversary was the following week, and he was trying to get time off for it. We spent our first anniversary apart, so Andy had suggested a date for this year. Inside, my feeling was torn among wanting him to rest, looking forward to the date, and trying not to burden Andy. That was my recent state. I would talk to him about Violet after the anniversary. While I was thinking this, an incident happened. Of all nights, it was our wedding anniversary. True to his word, Andy took the day off and took me on a date. He wanted my homemade dinner, so when we got back home after the date,
There she was. At the front door, that person was. "It's your wedding anniversary today, right? I made dinner,"
Violet said, showing Tupperware from her bag. As I thought, uh-oh. And looked at Andy, he looked the most resigned. But we couldn't be so cruel as to send away someone who brought food. Andy seemed to be resigned to it too. "Eat and then go home today." He said that and opened the front door. I was so looking forward to coming home with Andy and having dinner. Now the entrance looked like the gates of hell.
"God, please protect us."
Violet entered the living room, happily opened the Tupperware, and ordered me to get the dishes. Wanting her to leave quickly, I moved promptly and obediently. Andy seemed to feel the same and helped, but Violet said,
"You sit down. You're the star today."
And she moved the chair at the table to make Andy sit.
"Wait, what day is this? Isn't the wedding anniversary about the couple? Why is an outsider taking charge?"
But I stayed quiet. Of course, it was to send her home quickly. We should work emotionlessly like a robot, eat dinner, and send Violet home. That was the mission for us as a couple. Let's do this. What Violet prepared was Andy's favorite meatloaf and sides. Seeing this, I again thought, oh. Noticing my face, Andy asked me, "What's wrong?"
Well, I doubled up. You like meat dishes, so I was preparing a steak with premium meat.
I honestly told that. Then Violet exclaimed,
Oh, premium meat. Great. Cook it quickly.
Of course, I hadn't prepared a portion for Violet, but she seemed eager to eat. However, saying no, wait, would just extend the time with Violet in a lecture. I'd rather avoid that at all costs. I should have kept quiet. Despair filled my heart as I reluctantly began preparing the steak. Here you go, I said as I placed the cooked meat on the table. I had other side dishes in mind, but for today, this would be enough. So, I gave my steak to Violet and thought I'd just eat her brought meatloaf and sides.
Thank you. This is special for you, Monica. I made it just for you, always working so hard.
With a big smile, Violet pulled out a large Tupperware from her bag. Looking inside, at first glance, it seemed like a meatloaf drenched in gravy sauce, but on closer inspection, something was off. It was strangely red and shiny.
Wait. Raw meat? What is this, so mysterious and unknown? Why mine was different from Andy's tomato sauce version?
Let me remind you, Violet had a history of turning my cooking into a high blood pressure menu.
Would such a person cook for a wedding anniversary?
I peered at the offered meatloaf for a moment, managing to thank her while buying time. Upon closer inspection, this is. Andy also peeked into the Tupperware and then at my face. It was amazing how couples could communicate just with a glance.
Andy, go ahead and eat. Yeah, yours looks like better meat, I'll take it. Thanks. What?
Violet's eyes widened at our exchange. Andy didn't hesitate to transfer the meatloaf from the Tupperware to his plate.
You don't have to do anything.
Normally, Violet would say like that, but now, she was just pale and silent as I thought.
Well, everything's ready, let's eat. No, no!
Violet snatched the meatloaf from Andy's hand with a near scream. The moment it fell and hit the floor, there was a thud, an unusual sound for a meatloaf.
This meatloaf makes quite a noise, doesn't it?
Indeed. Did you overcook it, Violet? I asked with a sarcastic smile, while Andy just stared at Violet. She remained silent, eyes downcast at the meatloaf. Hey, Violet. Why is it okay for me to eat it, but not Andy? Come on, tell me. Hey, hey. I annoyingly hovered around the stunned Violet. My patience, already thin from her ruining our anniversary, had reached its limit. The thrill of retaliation was unexpectedly exhilarating.
Andy doesn't like tomato sauce. I wanted to make something he likes for the anniversary.
Eh? I like any meat, really. It's a waste, maybe it's still good, I'll eat this.
No, you shouldn't eat something that's fallen.
Violet panicked as Andy casually picked up the meatloaf, talking nonchalantly.
Is it wrong for me to eat what I like?
Right.
It's a shame not to eat it though he says he will eat it.
Oh, Violet, you can eat it, it's okay.
A little bit won't hurt.
Andy's smirk was barely containable, understanding everything from the sound meatloaf was dropped. I almost laughed, but managed to restrain myself. Maybe it's too big for you to eat? We have steaks. Should I cut it smaller, wait here?
Eh?
Oh, I'll cut it then. Right, do that. As Violet flustered, Andy brought the cutting board and knife. Here goes. Let's it cut, but as expected, the meatloaf couldn't be cut.
Oh my, this meatloaf is quite hard, isn't it? Maybe the gravy sauce is slimy?
Maybe it'll work if it's washed.
Great idea.
This was a turning point for Violet, but I headed to the sink with the meatloaf.
Wait! Stop! Please, Monica! I'll remake it. Remake it? How was she planning to do that? Could she really think we hadn't noticed?
Both Andy and I had realized it from the moment it was in the Tupperware. Ignoring Violet's attempt to stop us, washing off the gravy sauce revealed a food sample meatloaf.
This is clearly not meat, even without tasting it. Violet, do you make meatloaf out of wax? A family recipe? A secret ingredient? It's a bit too conspicuous, though.
I waved the food sample meatloaf next to my face, taunting Violet.
So I grew up on wax, huh? You're a wax figure. Stop it, that's creepy. Kidding.
I know. Violet glared at us with a hateful look as we joked around. Violet, I understand you dislike me, but aren't you embarrassed by such an obviously childish setup?
Shut up! It's your fault for not divorcing despite my coming over every day.
So, I had no idea that she was hoping for a divorce. After all, both Andy and I, though annoyed by Violet, still loved each other. We never even considered divorce, so we didn't raid into Violet's intentions. We only thought about how to get her to leave quickly or how she was a nuisance. Now that I think about it, Violet's method to push for a divorce was incredibly inefficient.
You could have just said so. I should have been clear too, like, Violet, you're annoying, stop adding salt to my cooking. Eh?
Both Violet and Andy were surprised by this. The dinners were oddly sweet or salty, so I spied on Violet after cooking.
And there she was, shaking salt like she was vanquishing something. Do you want to shorten your life that much?
Violet turned bright red. She seemingly didn't expect that I had noticed.
Sing that song again, please. You were humming, right? It was good.
Violet glared at me with teary eyes as I egged her on. Humming or talking to oneself is most embarrassing when you know someone heard.
Humming while ruining Monica's cooking.
Andy glared at Violet.
I can't believe it.
I said, and then.
Why would you go that far?
Andy held his head.
Mom, even if you do such things, I won't divorce. What's the point? You want me to suffer through a divorce I don't want?
Violet looked at him in surprise by a pure question from Andy. No.
It's undeniable, right? It's only because Monica is patient. Otherwise, I might have been divorced.
It was a fair point. In that sense, I should be known as the patient daughter-in-law who endures Violet's unreasonable demands in the neighborhood.
Enough. It's an important day, so please leave. Here, take your wax meatloaf as a souvenir. Wait, Andy.
Violet clutched Andy's arm, trying to persuade him.
Enough. I was really looking forward to today. I finally got a day off. I don't even have the energy to be angry anymore. You've been a nuisance every day, and now you ruined the day I worked so hard for. It's too much. Get out.
Andy skillfully twisted his hand free from Violet's grip and pushed her out the front door. Violet wailed outside, but I no longer feared the neighbors' opinions. There was no turning back now. Andy seemed to feel the same, declaring a redo of our anniversary. He eagerly asked for my cooking. I laughed and replied,
Sure.
Violet's crying didn't bother us. Afterwards, due to complaints from the neighbors about the noise, Andy contacted James, who came to pick up Violet. Surprisingly, upon seeing Violet, James slapped her cheek. I heard that James had always reprimanded Violet, saying she shouldn't visit us too often, that a couple needs their own time to be truly a couple. But she didn't listen, insisting we were happy with her visits. James kept quiet, thinking we were enjoying it, unaware of the trouble we were experiencing. After apologizing to us, James also explained the situation to the neighbors on our behalf. Thanks to that, word spread through the condo, and I was able to shed the reputation of being the clueless and incompetent daughter-in-law. I was grateful for James' intervention. My own words wouldn't have had the same effect.
Thank you, James.
And now, after being scolded by James, Violet stopped imposing on our home. But she harassed me whenever we went back home, thinking nobody was watching. However, James, suspecting something like this, caught her red-handed and averted any issues. Well, not for Violet.
If you keep trying to make Andy and Monica divorce, you can't stay in this house.
James said so and Violet was told to divorce. Thanks to that, we found peace, but I worried about elderly James living alone. So we decided to live with him. Initially, it was out of gratitude, but it turned out to be quite wonderful. He would pick up our son from kindergarten without being asked. And he cooked French cuisine, drawing on his experience as a former restaurant staff. It's embarrassing how well he takes care of us when we should be the ones helping him. Once again, thank you, James. For him, living in a lively home with small children at his age was something he never expected, and he's grateful for it. He's too good of a person, truly a father to be respected. It makes sense why Andy couldn't argue with him, and why his words were absolute in his home. He's always right. No wonder he's absolutely truthful. Even at our home, we obediently listen to what he says. Honestly, it's not like winning the lottery or a grand business success, not the happily ever after you hear in fairy tales. But with not only James, but 2 sons and a daughter, our days are lively, just as James said they would be. Even as a wife who doesn't bother with skincare and is getting older, I have a kind, loving husband who still takes me on dates for our anniversary every year. Oh, I do my share of housework and parenting. Just tend to put myself last, hee. Despite everything, I've come to appreciate the ordinary. It's been 15 years since we were married. We still have the freshness of newlyweds, combined with the comfort and laxness that comes with familiarity, feeling happiness in everyday life. For our next anniversary date, I should work on skincare and getting in shape. I think I said that last year too.
I gave your dead ex-husband's life insurance money to my eldest son's wife for her housewarming. What's yours is mine, so you shouldn't have any complaints.
Divorce? Understood. I guess he thought I would cry and refuse the divorce, because my husband seemed a bit surprised. Don't think everything will go your way. Just you watch. My name is Jennifer. I am actually remarried to my current husband, David. I was widowed from my previous husband, William, due to illness. William had a disease since his youth, which worsened and led to his death. Concerned about me being left alone, William left me a substantial amount of life insurance. I had no children with William. I met David through a relative's introduction. When I tried to refuse him, saying I wasn't a first-time bride.
Don't worry about that,
he said. I felt happy, as it seemed he accepted not just me but also William. Since remarrying David, due to my frail health and David's high income, I've been a housewife. I gave birth to our daughter Susan and our son Anthony, and I've tried my best with housework and child-rearing. David sometimes brought home stress from work, behaving selfishly and yelling suddenly, but I managed to get by. When David was in a bad mood, moocher, nuisance, he would call me things like that. But I am grateful to David for providing a financially comfortable life. David treated our son Anthony specially as the heir to the house. For Susan and Anthony's birthday and Christmas gifts, school entrance gifts, and other occasions, he clearly favored one over the other. During long vacations in summer, he would take Anthony to his parents' house and not return him for days. At David's parents' house, Anthony could eat sweets and play games all he wanted, messing up his daily rhythm and study habits. When he returned, he would rebel and look down on me, making it very difficult to return to our normal life. I appealed many times to stop this, as it wasn't good for Anthony, but
I took in a woman with a marriage history. A wife shouldn't talk back,
he said, and never accepted it. Susan disliked David and his family's home and left the house early. Susan got married about 5 years ago. She has children and is struggling with childcare. Anthony got married about 2 years ago. His wife was young and beautiful. I often had trouble with Anthony's wife, Nancy's attitude, but we didn't meet often, and I thought maybe that's just how young people are these days, so I didn't interfere much. Now, this happened about 2 years ago. When Anthony and Nancy had dinner at our house to celebrate their marriage, Nancy said as soon as she arrived.
Wow, what a lovely house. Anthony grew up here? I'm so jealous. David, you're so successful, how impressive. Well, my wife is useless and can't work, so I had to work hard alone. But I guess this house is getting a bit old, just like my wife. How unpleasant, houses and women shouldn't be old. Women should be young and cute like you, Nancy. Nancy, you work, right? That's commendable. In this day and age, capable women need to work and live in society. Unlike my useless wife.
David was smitten with the attractive Nancy and insulted me unnecessarily. This house is old, but I keep it well organized and clean. Perhaps because of David's groundless accusations, Nancy seems to think it's okay to look down on me just because I'm older. She even directed her condescending gaze at my eldest daughter, Susan.
Susan is just like Jennifer, huh? I think you should take care of your nails and wear some accessories. Have you given up just because you have kids? I won't become like Susan after marriage, Anthony, don't worry.
Of course, you're different from Mom and Susan. They're so different, it's like they're not even the same species. Nancy acts superior and out of line towards Susan, who is struggling with childcare every day, but neither David nor Anthony seem to notice how ridiculous it is. After the dinner, when Anthony and Nancy left, Susan said in a dismayed voice, "Her attitude is questionable, isn't it? Honestly, I don't want to be involved." Regarding this, David said, "Susan, are you angry because she hit the nail on the head?" "Ah, women's jealousy is ugly," he said dismissively. Susan, looking truly disgusted, said, "Dad, you need to look at things more calmly or you might lose your way.
A woman shouldn't speak so arrogantly. You always say such presumptuous things, Susan. Just go home."
David, upset, locked himself in his room. "Mom, if you have any troubles or concerns, please consult me right away. I'm kinda worried about you." Susan left after saying that. One day, Susan invited me to a cafe in the neighborhood. Ever since that incident, Susan has been inviting me out more often, maybe to check if I'm all right.
Mom, now that you're free from child-rearing, why don't you find a hobby or something enjoyable? Remember how you used to love gardening? Do you still do that?
I still do a bit of gardening at home. Maybe I should take this time to relearn about different types of flowers and their planting methods.
These days, many people post their gardening pictures on social media, which is fun to look at and can be inspiring. Let me see your phone, I'll install the app for you.
After saying that, she installed a social media app on my phone. Indeed, there were many beautiful gardening images, and I found them educational. I was impressed that young people nowadays use such convenient and enjoyable things. From that day, I started browsing various posts whenever I had time. Not just gardening, but I also began searching for information on local botanical gardens and nice cafes. One day, I came across a post that caught my eye. It was about a new Italian restaurant in our neighborhood, which I had wanted to visit. But David had said,
"Don't waste my hard-earned money on frivolous things."
So, I wasn't allowed to go out to eat. The post showed a man and a woman dining together, perhaps on a date. They weren't showing their faces, just their hands, a high-end brand purse, and the keys of a luxury car. However, the purse and the style of the nails on the woman's hand seemed similar to Nancy's. And the man's hand didn't seem like Anthony's. It bothered me a little, but it was just a post on social media with no solid proof, so I was confused and didn't know what to do. When I consulted Susan about this, "Got it, I'll look into it a bit," she said. Recently, Anthony and his wife announced they were building a new house. It seems to be a stylish house, heavily influenced by Nancy's preferences.
Nancy keeps adding options, and the initial estimate is now a joke. She insists on a top-tier housemaker. But I can't say no when Nancy asks.
Anthony was in a good mood.
"Well, I wanted our house to be nicer than this one." "That's okay, right?" Anthony has no choice but to listen when a cute wife like Nancy asks for something. I wish Nancy would ask me for something. Oh, really? I wonder what I should ask for.
My presence being ignored, the three of them were excitedly having fun together. Thinking that a loan beyond one's means would only lead to future hardships, I considered sending some cash as a housewarming gift from us, and looked at the drawer with my debit card inside. To my surprise, the debit card containing the $300,000 insurance money left to me by my late husband William was missing. I immediately confronted David about it.
The debit card with the $300,000 insurance money from my late husband William is missing. What did you do with it? Where did you put it?
Then David said,
That money is for Nancy's housewarming. Since it's thanks to me that you have been able to live up till now, that money is mine, right? If you have a problem with that, we can just get a divorce, okay?
Saying this, David flaunted the divorce papers in front of me. That money was precious, left to me by William. Of course, I never intended to use it alone. It was meant to eventually rebuild this old house into a small single-story home where I could spend my twilight years with David. Anthony and Nancy looked at me with malicious grins.
That's right, Jennifer. Wait, you remarried? Then you should be more grateful to David. Did William die of an illness? How sad. But money is useless to someone who's dead. We'll make sure to use it properly in his place.
I took you in, Jennifer, even when you had a marriage history. I would appreciate a bit of gratitude. Besides, William died a long time ago. He's none of our concern. Wouldn't William be happier if lovely Nancy used the money more effectively than you, Jennifer? Facing David's nasty grin, I felt my affection for him cooling. Even though David was arrogant and looked down on me, I endured it because I thought he had accepted me and my late husband William, since it wasn't my first marriage. David, didn't you tell me not to worry about not being in my first marriage when we got married? Were those words a lie? Huh? That was just because I thought someone who felt inferior would be easier to manipulate. And it turned out to be true. Mom seemed to be tough on you because of that, but I couldn't care less. I was foolish. I had completely misunderstood. As a last hope, I turned to Anthony. Anthony, I raised you with love in my own way. Do you understand my sadness? What do you think, Anthony? I don't understand your feelings. As long as I have Nancy and money, that's all I need. So, you're giving me the money, right? As a parent, you should do anything for my happiness, right? Fulfill your responsibility. This was truly a shock. Regarding Anthony, I realized it was my responsibility for raising him this way. A feeling of guilt overwhelmed me. However, now that things have come to this, I resolved to focus on protecting myself. Understood. Then, let's get a divorce. Thank you for everything. I said emotionlessly, with a voice surprisingly low, even to myself. David, expecting me to cry and cling to him, looked a bit surprised at first. But then his expression changed to one of pity as he said, "You sure about this? Think hard, okay?" He said, and tossed the divorce papers at me. Anthony and Nancy were distorting their mouths in laughter. They all seemed like aliens to me. How much do they need to belittle others to be satisfied? As I quickly packed my things, I contemplated the future. Once I left the house, I immediately submitted the completed divorce papers to the courthouse. Now we would soon be officially divorced. I rented an apartment a little away from Susan's family's house and started living alone. I didn't persistently pursue David because I had a plan. One day, Anthony called, informing me that David had been arrested for theft. It was natural for suspicion to arise when someone, now a stranger, tried to withdraw $300,000 from a bank account under my name. At the police station, David claimed, "I supported Jennifer for years, so her things are mine. What's wrong with me withdrawing this money?" But such a claim wouldn't hold up. Despite his personality, I thought he was a calm and capable person, but his way of thinking had become so twisted. I felt embarrassed to have spent all these years married to such a man. Anthony seemed to think that if I spoke well of David to the police, his punishment could be lessened. Why would he think I would help lessen David's sentence?
I'm divorced now, it's none of my concern.
Don't contact me. I hung up the phone. Later investigations revealed that David had been embezzling company funds, leading to his dismissal. This was surprising. Was there a reason he needed money so desperately to commit such a crime? It felt like there were still facts I didn't know. Around the same time as David's arrest, Susan contacted me. She had been investigating the social media account I was curious about. The posts I had previously seen were carefully made without showing faces, but some revealed reflections in mirrors or easily identifiable locations. It was indeed Nancy. Selling personal information for likes, I was appalled by her lack of crisis management skills. Her need for validation was indeed ingrained. Among the posts were some that slandered or defamed others. There were also posts suggesting personal relationships with several people, hinting at infidelity. Susan presented this evidence to Anthony. Anthony, furious, confronted Nancy, but she brazenly responded, "If you have a problem, we can just get divorced, okay?" Showing defiance. Perhaps due to his infatuation, Anthony couldn't bring himself to divorce her. However, it was problematic since some of the men involved had families or held significant positions at work. Moreover, Nancy received a stern warning from her workplace regarding her defamatory posts on social media, making it difficult for her to stay at the company, leading to her resignation. Such actions were typical of Nancy, known for her excessive pride. Well, all of this no longer concerns me. Several months later, I received a call from David. I didn't want to answer, but after several calls, I decided to pick up.
How many times do you think I've called you? Well, never mind. The house is filthy now. No one does any housework. It's like a garbage dump. Jennifer, come and clean it up.
Huh? Who are you?
What?
It's you, David.
Your voice has become so old I couldn't recognize you.
Now, what were you saying?
I said come and clean the house. Can't you understand? Why should I, now a stranger, clean your house? What's with that arrogant tone? You and I were married, so you're also responsible for the house I'm living in.
I have no responsibility. How about doing it yourself? Housework is a simple task, isn't it? I blurted it out, recalling something I had been told in the past.
A man doing housework? I've told you so many times that housework is a woman's job. You're so stupid.
Then how about asking your beloved Nancy? Isn't she currently unemployed, a moocher and a nuisance as you once said? I found myself repeating things I had been told in the past.
I can't possibly ask Nancy to do such things.
I knew that Nancy wasn't capable of housework, but it seemed David was also afraid of being disliked by Nancy, so he couldn't bring himself to ask her for help. Look, David.
You and I are divorced, so we're no longer husband and wife. I have no obligation or responsibility to clean your house. Understand? If you contact me again, I'll consult a lawyer.
After hearing this, David hastily hung up the phone. Several days later, I received another call from David. Hey, I'm sorry. Please come back. I'm in trouble because I have no money. Wait, that's it? I'll remarry you. That should work, right? If we remarry, you'll have the responsibility to take care of me, right? This will settle everything. Now, hurry up and do the housework and cook for me. Ugh.
Why do you think I would be happy to get back together with you and take care of you?
I refuse. Absolutely not.
If you keep bothering me like this, I will call the police.
I really hope this is the last time he contacts me. It turns out David had been trying to please Nancy by showering her with gifts. Purses, earrings and other accessories, and even the down payment for a luxury car. That's why he embezzled money from his company. Nancy was aware of David's ulterior motives and exploited them fully. Despite everything being exposed, I still can't understand why David and Anthony can't detach themselves from Nancy. One day, Susan said, "Maybe Nancy is what they call a community crusher?" After some research, I found out that this refers to someone who destroys interpersonal relationships within communities like company organizations, university clubs, mom-friend groups, or neighborhood associations. Characteristics include a distorted need for approval, being aggressive and critical towards others. While I'm not sure if Nancy fits the description perfectly, there seem to be many similarities. But as for me, all I can do now is to live my life without any involvement with Nancy and her ilk. Now, they're known in the neighborhood as a problematic family living in a famous garbage house, constantly arguing with each other. Given Nancy's extravagant tastes, the monthly mortgage on the garbage house is apparently quite high. It's said they're falling behind on the payments and will likely lose their home to foreclosure soon. As for me, I'm living alone peacefully in an apartment near Susan's house. I've improved a lot at gardening on my balcony, thanks to learning from social media. I sometimes do part-time jobs in gardening at local parks or botanical gardens, and also participate in volunteering. One of my joys is occasionally babysitting my grandchild and having meals with Susan's family. Susan's husband is a gentle person and is kind to me. I'm very grateful. Looking back, perhaps my late husband William helped expose the true nature of David and Nancy. This experience made me reflect on how I always felt inferior and never took action before. As a result, I've been hurt, and more importantly, I made Susan suffer for a long time. If I'm this hurt, Susan, who was just a child then, must have suffered even more. I also feel sorry for Anthony. From now on, I plan to think for myself and associate with people who value me and whom I value. It's never too late to start. My life is surely just beginning.
Kayla, you do realize you're a farmer, right? Please don't touch Samuel with those dirty, soil-stained hands. I hate even having to interact like this. No filthy poor people allowed. Please stay away from now on. I've never even had the chance to hold Samuel. Ever since we met, Naomi has treated me like an enemy, saying mean things and showing me a terrible attitude. Because of that, my heart has already reached its limit. Why is being a farmer something to be frowned upon? I'm just doing my job. I've resisted bending to Naomi's unreasonable behavior up until now, but even that has its limits. Yet, God hasn't abandoned me. My name is Kayla, a widow in my 50s. I live with my son Kenneth and his wife Naomi after my husband passed away. Our family has been farming for generations, and I've continued to work on the farm, inherited from my ancestors. Kenneth, already married, stayed to take over the farm. He's a hard worker and proactive in farming. But to be honest, things haven't been going well with Naomi.
Naomi, can we talk? I want to check on the farm. Will you come with me?
One day, I invited her with those words. There's a reason I spoke up like this. Marrying Kenneth essentially means taking over the farm. Kenneth understands this well and actively studies farming, but Naomi doesn't seem very enthusiastic about the work. I understand that farming might be seen as a tough and dirty job, especially by the younger generation. I thought the same when I was younger. But once you start, it can be unexpectedly rewarding. Naomi hasn't even set foot in the field yet, and at this rate, she might never discover that sense of fulfillment. So, I thought about going to the field with her to help her find that satisfaction. However, Naomi's response to my invitation was far from positive. To the field? Why? I hate the idea of going to such a dirty place. If you must go, please go alone, Kayla. I'll be relaxing in my room.
Don't say that. This job isn't as dirty as you make it out to be. You might even find it enjoyable if you actually give it a try. A little visit wouldn't hurt, would it?
It's not like that at all. I genuinely hate farming. Bugs come out, the vegetables are dirty. Isn't it awful to force someone to come to the field?
Kayla, this is harassment, you know. Harassment, she said, and I couldn't help but let out a surprised huh. That was never my intention. It was meant to be a gesture of concern, hoping to slightly erase her aversion to farming. Yet Naomi continued.
If you understand, then please never ask me to farm again. I didn't marry for your sake, you know. If you say something like this again, I might consider divorce.
With that, she spat out her words and returned to her room. I thought about discussing this with Kenneth, but he's so positive about farming and works hard every day, I just couldn't bring myself to tell him. So, I decided not to report this incident with Naomi to him, and from then on, I aimed to live a life that didn't upset her, avoiding any confrontation. But even that didn't go well. In front of Kenneth, Naomi was very kind and dependable. However, the moment Kenneth was away, in the field or out shopping, Naomi would transform entirely.
I have no intention of doing the housework, just so you know. If you want housework done, Kayla, do it yourself. I'm not a housekeeper. Kayla, wasn't today's dinner a bit too careless? It was so bad, I thought I would vomit. I managed to eat it, but when I think that Kenneth has been eating such food since he was little, I feel so sorry for him.
Naomi's heartless words kept coming. Each time I faced them head-on, I felt my heart aching. Why do I have to be subjected to such unreasonable words? What have I done to deserve this? No matter how many times I asked myself, no answer came. And seeing me worn out, Naomi would laugh again.
Kayla, you really aren't cut out to be a person. To think such a person is my mother-in-law, I can't help but worry about the future. I'm sure Kenneth doesn't rely on you much either. Elderly people like you should retire from work soon. Stop forcing the farm onto him. We have our own things we want to do. So, Kayla, please just disappear from our world. I'm sorry.
The only words I could muster in response to her barrage were I'm sorry. I was so broken that I couldn't think of any words of defiance. Days like this continued, and I eventually developed insomnia. Yet, somehow, I kept pushing myself in my work. Naomi might think farming isn't a big deal, but knowing there are people waiting for the vegetables I grow, I couldn't afford to take a break.
Mom, are you okay? You look a bit haggard.
Watching me weaken day by day, Kenneth expressed his concern. But Kenneth only sees the good side of Naomi. He's unaware of the cruel words she hurls at me. I wonder what would happen if he found out. If Kenneth and Naomi were to divorce, would that be my fault? Am I stealing his happiness because of me? With those thoughts, I couldn't say anything more. I escaped his worries with some non-committal words like I'm fine, even though I'm really not. I really am a coward. Amidst all this, some good news arrived. Naomi was pregnant. Feeling unwell, Kenneth took her to the hospital, where they received the diagnosis. That day, the house was filled with a celebratory mood. Naomi seemed to be in a good mood too, not hurling her usual cruel words at me. I even thought it might be the first happy day I've had in a long time. I did my best to support her, ensuring she could have a healthy baby. I prepared meals with plenty of nutrients and fresh vegetables, and knowing that wouldn't suffice, I also made sure to serve delicious meat and fish dishes. She seemed to enjoy the meals, and that filled my heart. Maybe my extra kindness was also because I thought it's important not to stress her during her pregnancy. Eventually, she safely gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I was relieved that there were no health issues at birth. I couldn't visit right away because of my farm work. After some time, Naomi and my grandson returned home. The baby was named Samuel. I endeavored even more, keeping in mind that she now needed to raise Samuel healthily, without too much stress, and hopefully relying on me. But it seemed my efforts didn't reach her. One day, she summoned me. Kayla, a moment. Wondering what it was about, I asked her, only to be met with unbelievable words.
Kayla, do you realize you're a farmer? Please don't touch Samuel with those dirty, soil-stained hands. I hate having to interact like this. No dirty, poor-like people allowed. Please stay away from now on.
What?
I was dumbfounded by her abrupt words. Seeing my reaction, she laughed even more.
All this time, I've been pretending to be part of the family, but it's all pointless.
She mocked me. I wanted to be family. I thought we could support each other as a family. But it seems that was just a nuisance to her. Unforgivable. To dismiss all my feelings like this. What kind of person does that? Anger towards her welled up inside me, but even then, I didn't know how to respond. Understood. And that was all I could respond. I really am a coward. Even in such a situation, I couldn't muster a response to her words. Why am I so incapable? I thought about whether it was my fault, but more than that, I felt a strong sense of injustice towards her. And in those moments, God didn't abandon me.
Kenneth, there's something I need to talk about.
At the dinner table that day, Naomi spoke up, sharing everything that had happened. She claimed she had been harassed by me, that she had endured it all this time, but just now I had gone as far as to tell her to leave. She was terrified about what might happen to Samuel if she continued to live with me. She wanted to move out to live just with Kenneth and Samuel, away from me. That was Naomi's claim. Of course, I had no recollection of harassing her. In fact, I felt I was the one being bullied. But my worn-out heart couldn't muster a proper defense.
Well, I can't imagine Mom harassing anyone, but if you feel that way, maybe we should consider moving out.
Kenneth's words seemed to please Naomi greatly. After that, they decided to move out. However, they couldn't move too far since the family business needed to be continued, so their new home would still be near mine. Yet, just the thought of not having Naomi in the same house made me feel somewhat relieved. Realizing this made me feel awful again. We're a family, I wanted to live hand in hand. If there were misunderstandings, I wanted to work on understanding each other. But my heart was weaker than I thought. And so, they moved to their new home, and I was left to live alone in this big house. Kenneth continued to visit often, but I started to feel the loneliness. The incident happened the day after they moved out. After finishing the day's work, I came home and, having some free time, checked my mobile phone to find numerous missed calls. All from Naomi. Wondering what it could be, but feeling a surge of aversion towards her, I decided to ignore the calls. There were also several texts seemingly asking me to pick up the phone, but I ignored those too. What could she possibly want now? There's nothing I need to talk to her about anymore. I had a bad feeling, but in the end, I did nothing and left it at that. Then, that evening, the doorbell rang. Thinking it might be her, I checked, and sure enough, it was Naomi.
Naomi, what is it? I'm sorry, but could you please leave? I don't want to see your face.
At my response, she looked as if she was about to cry.
Why didn't you say anything?
She asked. Say anything? About what? I had no idea, so as I was thinking.
Why didn't you say anything, Kayla? You're not just a farmer, are you? You're also a landowner. I didn't know that. Why did you keep such an important thing a secret?
Her words left me speechless, a stunned what escaping my lips. Indeed, as she said, my family has been a line of farmers and, simultaneously, landowners. My family has been managing this area's lands for a very long time. Most homes around here are built on land protected and leased by my ancestors. As a result, the locals and real estate agents managing these properties can't go against me. Many respect me for owning so much land. However, I had deliberately chosen not to mention this to her. She looked down on me just for being a farmer, and I thought she wouldn't be interested in my status anyway. It seems she found out through a certain incident. Kenneth and Naomi had moved to a recently built apartment where she noticed that their rent differed from that of their new friends. Their rent was significantly cheaper. Puzzled, she consulted Kenneth. Then,
isn't it because the land belongs to Mom?
He suggested. True to Kenneth's words, when they decided to move into this apartment, the real estate agent contacted me, offering to rent it out cheaply. I've been leasing lands to this real estate agency for a long time. some since my parents' days, establishing an inseparable bond. Faced with this unknown fact, she was taken aback. Though aware I was a farmer, she had no idea about the landowning. This revelation apparently panicked her.
If you had told me, I wouldn't have behaved like that. I wouldn't have suggested moving out either. I would have definitely thought of getting along with Kayla. Why didn't you tell me? If you had, it wouldn't have come to this.
I thought you weren't interested in that kind of thing, Naomi.
Don't decide that for me. If I had known you were a landowner, none of this would have happened.
In a panic at the doorstep, she grabbed her head and sat down. The commotion attracted the neighbors, their voices audible, making the situation embarrassingly uncomfortable for me. The moment she learned I was a landowner, she started blaming me like this. After demeaning me all this time, she now tries to take advantage of my position. Her opportunistic behavior was infuriating. And dealing with her in this moment felt like an incredibly troublesome time, prompting me to let out a heavy sigh. Then, she looked up in desperation and started apologizing profusely.
Kayla, I'm sorry for the horrible things I said. It was a shock to me too. The thought that I wasn't relying on you made me feel down. I don't remember when, but you once said families should support each other, right? I think that's a wonderful idea. So why don't we support each other now? I want to make a real effort with you, Kayla.
Naomi said that. Her words felt sincere, but it was also clear that it was all for her own benefit. Her frantic attempts to keep me close are solely because of my status as a landowner. She, who showered me with cruel words for being a farmer, changed her tune once she learned I was also from a landowning family. Dissatisfied with her behavior, I coldly dismissed her desperate pleas.
No matter what you say, I no longer intend to join hands with you, Naomi. I remember every harsh word you threw at me. They haunt my dreams, and I still can't sleep well. Life became a bit more peaceful without you, and the thought of returning to that hellish existence disgusts me. Please, don't ever show your face to me again. I don't want to see you ever again.
As I spoke, she hung her head, then pleaded even more desperately.
Does this mean you won't even hold Samuel? You might dislike me, but Samuel is your grandson. Won't you look after him? Isn't it heartless to ignore your own flesh and blood?
Unbelievable. I do feel sorry about Samuel. After all, none of this is his fault or Kenneth's, it's all her doing. But that's a separate issue. Once I've decided not to interact with her, it's inevitable that my involvement with Samuel will decrease. She, the very cause of this situation, still acts as if I'm the one at fault, which only adds to my disgust. Yet, she doesn't seem ready to leave. Seeing me fall silent, perhaps she grew desperate and threw more selfish words at me. Her expression was indeed one of utter desperation.
I understand that what I did is unforgivable. I've done things that should anger you, Kayla, and for that, I'm truly sorry. But please, don't abandon me. My heart has changed. I'm filled with a desire to make things right with you. Let's stop this sad separation. We're family, we should support each other, filling in where the other falls short. I'll properly engage in the farm work, I promise. So, please forgive me.
Her eyes were bloodshot, clearly desperate to cling to our relationship. The old me might have been swayed by her plea, offering kind words and striving to work together as a family. But now, she is nothing but a destructive force in my life, not a cherished family member. No matter how much she pleads or professes her desire to live together, my mind is made up. I've already given up on her.
I'm sorry, but continuing with you is impossible. Your words have hurt me deeply, time and again. I can't endure that life anymore. Being tossed around by you is beyond my limit. Sure, I feel sorry for Samuel and Kenneth, but my heart can't take it anymore.
That's...
Naomi murmured. Please, don't involve me anymore. And that means forever. I don't consider you part of my family. So, goodbye. The doorbell rang several more times, but after a while, perhaps noticing the neighbor's stares, she finally went home. I never imagined she would come to me like this. All because of my position. But I couldn't call such a person family. The incident spread around the neighborhood and eventually reached Kenneth, leading to a massive argument between him and Naomi. He learned of her behavior towards me, became furious, and even brought up divorce. She desperately tried to avoid it, but once it went to court, the matter was settled. He successfully gained custody of Samuel. It seems she often left the child rearing to him, which might have impacted Samuel's character if it had continued. So, I believe this outcome is for the best. After the verdict, she returned to her parents' home, but it appears Kenneth had informed them of her behavior towards me, and they eventually turned her away. Now, she's working part-time at a small company, barely making ends meet, and living in an old apartment. On the other hand, my life has also changed. Kenneth brought Samuel to my house. Now, Kenneth and I are supporting each other, jointly raising Samuel. After the incident, the neighbors expressed their concern, but I've regained my strength and am back to farming. Kenneth is serious about taking over the family business in the future. The whole ordeal with Naomi was a disaster for both of us, but I hope that one day he finds a partner with whom he can truly collaborate and support. Until then, I intend to protect the happiness of Kenneth and Samuel as a mother.